Before there was a creature bold enough to rise on two legs, before a lineage of walkers carved their presence into the dust of East Africa, the world was already preparing the stage. Long before Australopithecus Afarensis left its soft, unmistakable footprints, Earth itself was shifting, rumbling, transforming. The early Pliocene was not a silent chapter, it was a restless, breathing landscape defined by extremes. And in this world of volatility, the first hints of uprightness began to take shape, not as a sudden leap, but as a response to a planet in motion. Imagine a morning more ancient than memory. The sun rises slowly over the great Rift Valley, its rays slicing through a haze of volcanic dust and drifting moisture. The air is warm but unsettled, carrying the scent of damp earth, cracked mud, and distant vegetation. Herds of antelope-like creatures traverse the plains, alert and nervous. Forest patches cling stubbornly to the edges of widening grasslands, their shadows long and uncertain. This mixture of terrain, neither stable nor predictable, creates a kind of ecological puzzle. Any creature living here must learn adaptability or face extinction. And it is within this tension, within this uncertainty, that the evolutionary story of standing upright quietly begins. In these early hours of prehistoric dawn, survival is not guaranteed. A sudden rustle might mean a predator hidden in the tall grass. A shift in wind might signal approaching storms. The very ground beneath one's feet might split or sink as tectonic forces tug at the earth. The Rift Valley is a place where landscapes change as quickly as the creatures that inhabit them. But change, even violent change, brings opportunity. As forests thin and food sources scatter, movement becomes essential. And with movement comes innovation, tiny, incremental adjustments that push anatomy toward the future. The earliest hominins did not wake one morning and decide to stand upright. Their journey was gradual, spanning millions of years. Yet the world around them offered both pressure and possibility. When trees were abundant, climbing was safe. But as the climate oscillated between wet and dry cycles, those trees became fewer and farther apart. The ground, once avoided, became a necessary path. Crossing open spaces meant exposure to predators but also access to new food, new shelter, new strategies. And over countless generations, bodies began to shift, hips rotating, spines curving, feet reshaping. Each adaptation a subtle whisper of what was coming. But at this early moment in our story, at the dawn before footsteps, there is still uncertainty. Creatures like Ardipithecus and other pre-Afarensis hominins exist in an evolutionary limbo. They cling to trees yet flirt with the earth. They walk sometimes, climb often, and navigate a world that demands both. The viewer can imagine their hesitation. Every step on the ground feels like a negotiation with danger. Every climb back into the branches feels like a return to safety. Yet the world refuses to stay still, and so these early beings must adapt in rhythm with the Earth's shifting temperament. In this section of the narrative, the philosophical tone emerges. Was standing up an act of courage or necessity? Did our ancestors rise because they must, or because the environment invited them to try? The answer lies somewhere between survival and experimentation. Evolution is not purposeful in the human sense, yet, when we look back across millions of years, it feels intentional. It feels like an unfolding story, one where each adaptation leads us to the next chapter. The first glimmer of upright walking becomes symbolic, not only scientifically but emotionally. It represents the first fragile assertion of identity in a dangerous world. As the morning progresses across this ancient landscape, life moves in cautious harmony. A small group of early hominins climbs down from their sleeping trees. Their motions are slow, deliberate, watchful. They move through dappled light, stepping between roots and across patches of open soil. Their bodies sway gently as they test their balance on two legs. They are not yet committed bipeds, but their posture hints at the path ahead. To stand, even momentarily, is to see farther. To see farther is to plan. To plan is to survive. And survival, in this era, is everything. The scene widens to reveal rivers cutting through the valley, shaped by seasonal floods that change direction unpredictably. Volcanic cones loom in the distance, releasing plumes of ash that drift across the horizon. Herds of grazing animals migrate in sweeping arcs, tracking the movement of water and vegetation. And amid this choreography of life and land, the first walkers find themselves pulled, sometimes pushed, toward an adaptive breakthrough they do not yet understand. The world is neither kind nor cruel. It simply is. But for those who inhabit it, every day is a negotiation, a contract signed with uncertainty. Standing up becomes more than a physical transformation, it becomes a metaphor for resilience. To rise is to challenge vulnerability. To rise is to confront fear. To rise is to claim space in a world that offers no guarantees. And though these early hominins do not know it, their tentative steps are the beginning of a lineage that will one day dominate the planet. As the sun reaches its height, the earth continues its ancient routines. But within those routines lies the seed of change. The creatures who will one day become Australopithecus Afarensis are forming the foundation upon which a revolutionary adaptation, bipedalism, will flourish. Their world is harsh, yet beautiful. Dangerous, yet full of promise. And while they cannot foresee the future, we, looking back, recognize the profound significance of these early moments. This is the dawn before footsteps. The quiet before the journey. The landscape before the lineage. And it is here, in this raw, shifting world, that the story of standing upright truly begins. Long before early hominins left their first deliberate marks on Earth, the land itself was already telling a story, one carved not by flesh and bone, but by molten fire, shifting crust, and restless tectonic plates. The East African Rift Valley, today known as one of the greatest natural scars on the planet, began as a fracture, a split in the continent's very foundation. It was a place shaped by contradiction, a land torn apart, yet destined to cradle the evolution of our earliest ancestors. Here, in this geological theater, the forces of destruction and creation danced together, forming the stage where Australopithecus Afarensis would one day rise. Imagine the land millions of years ago, a place trembling under the tension of Earth's interior. The crust stretches and thins, making cracking sounds that echo like distant thunder. Lava wells upward from hidden chambers, glowing faintly in the underbelly of the earth. Over time, valleys sink while mountains rise, as though the landscape itself is inhaling and exhaling. It is in these dramatic movements that the Rift Valley is born, a corridor of shifting earth, lined by cliffs, watered by rivers, and scattered with forests and freshly opened plains. But this beauty is forged under constant threat. Nothing here is stable. Nothing is guaranteed. The volcanic activity that sculpted the Rift Valley seems almost alive. Eruptions are frequent, not always catastrophic, but enough to alter the environment in cycles. Ash falls from the sky like ancient snow, coating everything in a fine layer of mineral dust. This ash enriches soils, drawing vegetation that supports diverse herbivores, which in turn attract predators. Over time, the valley becomes a magnet for life. But it remains a harsh host, earthquakes ripple through the ground without warning, cliffs collapse, rivers reroute overnight. Early hominins living here grow up in a world where unpredictability is a natural law. The Rift Valley's ever-changing landscape pushes species beyond comfort zones. Forests shrink in some areas while grasslands expand, forcing arboreal primates to venture into open spaces more frequently. Water sources shift, sometimes disappearing entirely during long droughts. Food is not always where it was the year before, or even the season before. These pressures act like invisible hands guiding evolution, rewarding flexibility and punishing specialization. For our ancestors, survival requires adaptation, not once, but endlessly. And it is the Rift Valley's volatile temperament that nudges them, generation after generation, toward new forms of movement and behavior. Picture an early morning scene, the ground still warm from the previous night's geothermal heat. Steam rises from fissures, creating ghostly veils over patches of vegetation. Herds gather near the few reliable streams, their hooves sinking into mud enriched from volcanic mineral deposits. Scattered stands of woodland cling stubbornly to the edges of widening savannas. The contrast is striking, lush greens pressed against dry golds, rivers twisting next to fields of ash. This mosaic environment challenges every creature that steps into it. But it also offers opportunity, new niches, new paths, new strategies. For early hominins, precursors to Australopithecus Afarensis, the Rift Valley is both a threat and a lifeline. Its changing terrain forces them to experiment with movement, learning to navigate a world where trees cannot always be relied upon for safety or food. The valley's steep inclines demand stronger legs, its open plains encourage vigilance and longer sight distances. The fractured land teaches them to climb, to descend, to choose cautious routes around craters and fault lines. This constant negotiation with the terrain subtly molds their anatomy. Little by little, their bodies begin to favor upright travel, not as a sudden evolutionary gift, but as a response to the complexity of the ground beneath them. Volcanic eruptions, though destructive, become silent collaborators in this evolutionary symphony. When an eruption blankets the valley in ash, it resets the ecosystem. Vegetation dies, animals flee, and hominins must adapt quickly or perish. But ash also preserves footprints, carcasses, and even whole moments in time. Millions of years later, these preserved remnants become windows into ancestry, accidental messages from creatures who never intended to leave a legacy. The very forces that threatened their survival have become the storytellers of their existence. As the Rift Valley continues to widen over millennia, stretching the continent apart by mere centimeters each year, lakes form in its depressions. These lakes shrink and swell with climate fluctuations. Some become shallow, salty basins, others vanish completely. Such instability encourages nomadic habits. Early hominins are drawn to these waters for the food they attract: fish, shellfish, birds, and grazing animals. But when the lakes retreat, hominins must follow or find alternatives. This ebb and flow shapes their behavior, pulling them like tides across the landscape. Predators are abundant here. Big cats, massive hyenas, prehistoric crocodiles, all thrive in the Rift Valley's diverse habitats. Every trip to a waterhole is a calculated risk. Every crossing of an open plain invites danger. The valley teaches early hominins to become observers of movement, interpreters of shadows, listeners of distant roars. Awareness sharpens. Social cohesion strengthens. Those who move together, survive together. Those who can anticipate danger, live to see another day. The valley becomes not just a physical force but a psychological one. With each era, the climate shifts like a pendulum. Some periods bring lush abundance, fruiting trees, thick vegetation, and plentiful prey. Other stretches usher in droughts so severe that entire regions become wastelands. These droughts, especially during the Pliocene, push hominins further than ever before. They walk longer distances, forage in unfamiliar territories, test new food sources. Their bodies adapt to heat and distance. Thermoregulation becomes essential. The advantages of upright posture become clearer: less surface area exposed to the sun, more efficient long-distance travel, freed hands for carrying food or offspring. The Rift Valley, for all its violence, becomes a sculptor. It shapes landscapes, ecosystems, and ultimately the physiology and behavior of the creatures who inhabit it. Australopithecus afarensis does not simply appear here, they are forged here. Their long arms hint at their past in the trees. Their increasingly human-like legs reveal their future on the ground. Their mixed anatomy is not confusion, it is adaptation in progress. And the Rift Valley is the crucible in which this transformation unfolds. From a philosophical perspective, this place symbolizes the paradox of creation through destruction. Without the upheavals, the fractures, the volcanic fires, evolution might not have taken the course that led to us. The instability of the Rift Valley forced our ancestors to innovate, to explore, to walk, and eventually to think differently. It is a reminder that growth often emerges not from comfort, but from challenge. Survival requires curiosity, courage, and the willingness to confront uncertainty. As the section nears its end, the viewer feels the valley not as a distant geological concept but as a living world, a character with moods, dangers, and gifts. The Rift Valley does not nurture passively, it demands evolution. And from this demand rises one of the most important species in our lineage, Australopithecus Afarensis. Their journey, shaped by fire and time, begins right here, on fractured earth that will carry their footsteps into history. Long before Australopithecus afarensis made its mark on the prehistoric world, there were others, beings who walked, climbed, and disappeared long before their names were ever spoken by human tongues. They are shadows in the fossil record, hints of movement rather than fully told stories. Their bones are scarce, their traces fragile, and their existence often reconstructed from fragments no bigger than a hand. Yet without these early walkers, Afarensis would never have emerged. This section peels back the layers of deep time to reveal the ancestors who came before Lucy, the forgotten ghosts who first dared to explore the uncertain space between tree and ground. The earliest of these figures include species such as Sahelanthropus cadensis and Auroran tugenensis, beings who lived between 6 and 7 million years ago. Their fossils are rare, almost accidental survivors of an era barely accessible to science. A piece of skull here, a fragment of femur there, clues that suggest upright posture but leave much to interpretation. Scientists debate their significance, but what is undeniable is that something was happening in this ancient landscape. Some lineage, in some forgotten corner of Africa, began experimenting with upright movement far earlier than we once believed. Whether they were true ancestors or evolutionary dead ends, their tentative steps represent the first drafts of a long evolutionary manuscript. Then comes Ardipithecus, living around 4 million years ago. More complete than the earliest ghosts, but still shrouded in mystery. Ardipithecus ramidus, especially the famous Ardi skeleton, offers a glimpse into a creature balancing two worlds. Her pelvis hints at the ability to stand, but her feet retain grasping toes meant for climbing. She moves awkwardly on the ground, more comfortable in the canopy but no longer entirely bound to it. Her form suggests an evolution not driven by open savannas but by woodland environments, places where walking upright might offer specific advantages, such as reaching food or navigating broken forest floors. Ardi is a bridge, a soft step toward the future, but still far from the confident strides of Afarensis. There is a haunting beauty in imagining these early beings. They lived in environments vastly different from the later open plains of Lucy's time. Thick forests, patchy woodlands, tangled roots, and falling leaves shaped their daily existence. They climbed with agility but walked tentatively, their bodies unsure of which path evolution was carving for them. For millions of years, they existed in this transition, never knowing they were the prelude to something much larger. Their lives were filled with the same urgency all creatures face, finding food, avoiding predators, caring for offspring, but none of them were aware that their experiments in posture would someday echo through time. Following Ardipithecus comes another important figure, Australopithecus anamensis. Living between 4.2 and 3.9 million years ago, this species is a more direct ancestor to Afarensis. Their fossils, found largely in Kenya and Ethiopia, show a mixture of primitive traits with more advanced adaptations. Their tibia suggest strong, habitual bipedalism. Their teeth indicate a diet capable of handling tougher plants as environments fluctuated. With anamensis, the rise of upright walking becomes clearer. This species seems more decisively committed to the ground, though still capable of climbing when necessary. Unlike the ghosts before them, their presence feels more solid, less shadow, more substance. But even with anamensis, the story is incomplete. We do not know the sound of their calls, the shape of their social groups, or the rhythm of their lives. We can only infer from scattered remains and the landscapes in which they were found. These beings did not leave footprints like those preserved at Litoli. They left only bones, worn by time, often broken into pieces that scientists painstakingly reassemble. And yet, their fragmentary remains tell a powerful story. Walking upright did not begin suddenly with Afarensis. It emerged from a long lineage of trial and error, uncertainty and adaptation. Emotionally, there is something profoundly moving about these early ancestors. They lived and died without knowing that their steps were part of a larger journey, one that would eventually lead to us. They faced predators, droughts, and environmental shifts just as later hominins did, but their legacy is quieter. It is easier to see Lucy as a central figure because her skeleton is more complete, her story more accessible. But the ghosts before her were pioneers. They are the ones who took the first, trembling steps into a new form of movement, long before the world was ready to remember them. Imagine, for a moment, a small group of Australopithecus in a dappled woodland. The leaves rustle softly, and sunlight filters through the branches. One individual cautiously descends a tree, placing her foot on the forest floor with uncertainty. She shifts her weight, adjusts her balance, then takes another step. It is not graceful. It is not efficient. But it is different. This difference, this small deviation from the norm, sets everything else in motion. Evolution rarely makes leaps. It makes whispers. And this whisper would eventually grow into the stride of Australopithecus Afarensis. By the time Lucy's species emerges around 3.9 million years ago, the stage has already been prepared. The ghosts have walked, climbed, fallen, survived, and vanished. They have left behind just enough evidence to remind us that the human story does not begin with Lucy, it begins long before her. She is a chapter, not the introduction. And the forgotten ancestors who came before her, though faint in the fossil record, carry immense weight in the narrative. As this section closes, we feel the presence of those early walkers in the background of the story, vague shapes moving through ancient forests, half-adapted beings navigating worlds that no longer exist. Their footsteps may be lost to time, but their influence is not. Without them, there would be no Lucy. No Afarensis. No us. They are the silent architects of bipedality, the quiet predecessors of the species that will soon take center stage. When Australopithecus Afarensis finally steps into the prehistoric stage, the world changes, not through a sudden revolution, but through the quiet arrival of a creature caught perfectly between what was and what would someday be. They are neither ape nor human, neither bound to the canopy nor fully comfortable on the open plains. Instead, they embody transition itself, a living bridge between worlds. Their bodies, behaviors, and vulnerabilities reflect an evolutionary gamble unfolding in real time. To understand Lucy and her kind, we must look closely at what it meant to live in this threshold state, balancing old instincts with new possibilities. Picture an Afarensis individual emerging from the morning mist of the Pliocene savanna. The first thing one might notice is their size, smaller than modern humans, yet more robust than one expects from their silhouette. Adults stand roughly 1 to 1.5 meters tall, with males noticeably larger than females. Their frames are lightweight but powerful, built for enduring movement rather than brute strength. Their heads sit forward on their shoulders, not quite centered the way modern humans hold theirs. Their faces project outward, with pronounced brow ridges, flat noses, and jaws built to crush tough plant material. Their eyes, slightly larger in proportion than ours, scan constantly for danger. But it is their bodies that reveal the true story. The arms of Australopithecus afarensis remain long, reminiscent of tree-dwelling ancestors. Their hands have curved fingers, perfect for gripping branches. These features tell us that climbing is still essential, sleeping safely above ground at night, escaping predators, or foraging in the canopy. Yet below the waist, everything signals a profound shift. Their pelvis is short and broad, built to support upright walking. Their femurs angle inward, bringing their knees under their center of gravity. Their legs, though shorter than ours, carry the unmistakable signature of habitual bipedalism. Even their feet, despite retaining slightly flexible toes, carry arches that hint at the mechanics of walking rather than grasping. This combination, a climber with a walker's foundation, paints Afarensis as a creature belonging fully to neither environment. That tension is the heart of their existence. They navigate trees with the memory of their ancestors and traverse ground with the promise of their descendants. Every movement reflects this dual identity, fluid in some contexts, awkward in others. They climb better than any modern human ever could, yet walk better than any ape ever has. This is the anatomical compromise that defines their species, a compromise that would eventually shape the entire human lineage. If one could observe a group of Afarensis traveling across the Rift Valley, the gait would be recognizable but unusual. They move with a slight sway of the torso, their strides shorter than those of modern humans. Their steps are confident but not as efficient as ours. When they run, their arms instinctively rise for balance, a remnant of arboreal agility. Yet despite these imperfect mechanics, they are undeniably walkers. They traverse open ground with intention. They inspect the horizon from an elevated perspective. Their freed hands are available for carrying food, offspring, sticks, or stones. Each of these behaviors marks a subtle transformation in survival strategy. Their skulls reveal another layer of complexity. The brain size of Afarensis ranges from about 380 to 550 cubic centimeters, closer to modern chimpanzees than to Homo species. Yet brain size alone does not define intelligence. What matters is how the brain is used. And in Afarensis, there are signs of increased social awareness, better spatial memory, and more refined coordination. Their lives require constant decision-making, choosing when to climb or walk, detecting predators across distances, interpreting the behaviors of group members. Their cognition may be simple compared to ours, but it is evolving in a direction that will eventually lead to remarkable mental leaps. Emotion plays a role too. Though we cannot know their inner experiences, their fossils and reconstructions of behavior suggest group living, parental care, and social bonds. Their species likely forms multi-member groups, offering protection in numbers. Individuals groom each other to strengthen bonds, infants cling to their mothers for extended periods, and group members learn by watching each other forage or navigate obstacles. These behaviors suggest the beginnings of empathy, cooperation, and shared awareness, qualities that become essential to later hominins. Life for Afarensis is neither easy nor predictable. The environment shifts constantly, and food sources vary. Their diet reflects this challenge. Their teeth show wear patterns from eating hard, fibrous plants, seeds, nuts, fruits, and possibly small animals or insects. Their jaws are powerful, capable of chewing for long periods, a tool for survival in a world where climate instability demands dietary flexibility. They do not make tools in the human sense, but they likely use sticks to dig or stones to break open nuts. Their behavior hints at creativity, though not yet at cultural innovation. Predation remains a constant threat. Big cats, giant hyenas, crocodiles, and even large birds of prey pose danger. This fear shapes their daily rhythms. They descend from trees cautiously at dawn. They travel in tight groups. They rest in shaded areas where visibility is clear. Their eyes are always alert. Danger sharpens instincts, forces adaptation, and drives the need for coordination. The pressure of survival is a silent sculptor, refining both body and mind. Yet for all the danger, there is beauty in their world. The Rift Valley offers breathtaking landscapes, rolling plains filled with grazing animals, rivers twisting through mineral-rich soil, pockets of woodland full of fruit, insects, and shelter. Afarensis moves through this environment with familiarity, belonging fully to its rhythms. They recognize fruiting seasons, safe trees, migration patterns of herbivores, and the changing moods of the sky. Their relationship with the land is intimate, instinctive, and deeply rooted. From a philosophical standpoint, Australopithecus afarensis embodies the courage of becoming. They exist during a time when evolution is experimenting boldly, testing the limits of anatomy and behavior. They carry the weight of history in their limbs and the spark of future potential in their movement. Their upright posture is not just a biological shift, it is a symbol of transition, a gesture toward possibility. To watch them walk is to witness the quiet unfolding of human destiny. As this section draws to a close, one feels the presence of Afarensis not as static fossils in a museum, but as living beings navigating hardships, forming bonds, and carving out a space in a dangerous world. They are pioneers, even if they do not know it. Every footstep they make, whether on soil or ash, pushes the lineage a little further toward what will eventually become humanity. And with their arrival, the story of standing upright becomes more than an experiment, it becomes a defining chapter in the journey of life itself. There is no single moment in which a creature suddenly rose, straightened its spine, and announced the beginning of upright walking. Evolution never grants such dramatic clarity. And yet, when imagining the life of Australopithecus afarensis, it becomes possible to picture a moment, one not frozen in fossilized bone, but alive in the tension between necessity and instinct, when standing upright became more than an experiment. It became a choice shaped by the environment, forged by danger, and ultimately woven into the body of a species. This chapter is an attempt to capture that shift, not as a biological milestone alone, but as an emotional and philosophical turning point in the story of life. Imagine a young Afarensis following its group across the uneven terrain of the Rift Valley. The night has just lifted. The air smells of damp earth and ash, remnants of the season's scattered rain. The ground beneath them is cracked and unpredictable, shaped by the shifting plates that define their world. As the group moves, their bodies reflect ancient habits, arms swinging slightly outward for balance, heads turning constantly to scan for predators hiding in tall grasses. The young individual hesitates, pausing at the edge of a clearing. A rustle in the bushes sends a jolt of instinctual fear through its muscles. In that brief pause, it rises slightly taller, shifting its weight onto its extended legs, gaining just a bit more visibility over the horizon. That extra height becomes an advantage, one that may save its life. Moments like this accumulated over thousands of generations, shaping the very structure of Afarensis. The advantages of standing upright were not philosophical for them, they were practical, immediate, and essential. A biped could spot a lurking predator earlier. A biped could travel farther under the sun with less energy spent. A biped could reach fruits on low branches, carry handfuls of food or a vulnerable infant, and move across varied terrain more efficiently. Each benefit was small in isolation, but together they nudged evolution in a new direction. To understand the significance of this transition, consider the energy economy of movement. On four limbs, an ape-like ancestor uses more energy over long distances. Their bodies are designed for bursts of agility in trees, not sustained travel across open land. But as grasslands expanded and food sources spread out, walking became a necessity. Bipedalism, even in an imperfect early form, used less energy. This allowed Afarensis to explore wider areas without exhausting themselves, giving them access to food, water, and safer sleeping sites. Through this shift, evolution rewarded the walkers. Yet efficiency is only one part of the story. Standing upright also transformed the sensory experience of these early hominins. A higher vantage point allowed them to scan the horizon for movement, gazelles, predators, rival groups, or fruit-bearing trees. It gave them a psychological space in which awareness expanded. They could anticipate, plan, interpret subtle changes in their surroundings. A raised posture turned the world into a broader map. Danger no longer arrived solely from above in the trees, it could emerge from any direction. Upright walking sharpened vigilance, sculpting new patterns of attention. Picture a female Afarensis moving through scattered woodland during the dry season. Her infant clings to her side, its small hands gripping her fur. Food is scarce, water even scarcer. She spots a distant line of green, perhaps a surviving patch of vegetation, and begins the journey. Rising to 2 legs, she frees her arms to carry her child safely while stepping carefully across the warm soil. The gesture is not conscious innovation, yet it is life-changing. With her hands unburdened by locomotion, she can protect, carry, and forage simultaneously. This small behavioral flexibility becomes another strand in the evolutionary pull toward upright posture. Bipedalism, however, comes with costs. It reduces speed compared to 4-limbed running. It exposes the torso to predators. It moves the center of gravity in ways that make falling more dangerous. Early bipeds like Afarensis were not graceful walkers, they were pioneers, testing the boundaries of their bodies. Their lower backs curved to support the new posture, but this curve also introduced vulnerability. Their hip joints adapted, but imperfectly. Their feet evolved arches and shortened toes, but not yet optimized for modern walking. Evolution is a series of compromises, and Afarensis lived those compromises daily. Emotionally, one can imagine the tension they felt. Walking upright was useful, but not always safe. They must have chosen carefully when to rise and when to drop to all fours or leap for a tree. Their bodies were not yet fully committed to either lifestyle. This tension, this constant negotiation, shaped their world. Every step was an interplay between opportunity and fear. Philosophically, the moment we stood up marks a subtle but profound shift in identity. Upright posture changes not only how a creature moves, but how it exists. With height comes presence. With presence comes awareness. Walking on 2 legs allowed our ancestors to become organisms that engaged with the world differently, more boldly, more observantly, more strategically. It offered a new relationship with distance, horizon, and possibility. Scientifically, the fossil evidence confirms that Afarensis walked habitually. Their knees locked straight, their pelvis distributed weight evenly, and the famous Litoli footprints show a gait unmistakably bipedal. But imagining what these facts meant for a living creature brings the story to life. Every fossilized bone was once part of a body reacting to danger, seeking food, nurturing offspring, or exploring unfamiliar ground. Every anatomical adaptation was once a behavioral choice shaped by an ancient world. In a quiet moment, imagine an adult Afarensis standing on a rise overlooking the savanna as evening approaches. The sky glows orange, and the landscape hums with distant life. As they straighten their back, the wind brushes against their fur. For a fleeting second, they stand with posture almost human, upright, balanced, aware. They cannot know their place in the future, but we can. In that posture lies the beginning of every journey humanity will ever take: exploration, migration, creation, survival. The simple act of standing becomes the foundation of everything we are. Thus, the moment we stood up is not a singular event but a collective memory shaped by millions of small decisions across countless generations. It is a story of adaptation, courage, and possibility. It is the moment evolution stepped out of the trees and into the future. And for Australopithecus Afarensis, this moment marked the beginning of a new way of being, a way that would eventually lead to the long, remarkable path of humanity. There are moments in prehistory that feel impossibly intimate, moments where time folds, where the immense distance between then and now collapses into a single, fragile connection. The Litoli footprints are one such moment. Long before writing, before tools, before humans, a series of early hominins walked across a fresh bed of volcanic ash in Tanzania. They left nothing behind except their footsteps. Yet those footsteps, preserved by chance, became the oldest unmistakable evidence of upright walking, a message sent across 3.6 million years, carved not into stone, but into the softness of the earth. To stand before these prints today is to gaze into the past with a clarity almost too emotional to comprehend. To understand the significance of this ancient trail, we must first return to the day it was created. Imagine the landscape of Laetoli under the simmering presence of a nearby volcano. The air carries a metallic tang, a reminder that the earth beneath is alive and restless. A recent eruption has scattered ash across kilometers of ground, fine, gray, powdery, still warm from its descent. The land looks dusted with pale snow, blanketing grasses, rocks, and animal tracks alike. Clouds hang low, heavy with moisture. A light rain begins, turning the ash into a soft, sticky paste. Each raindrop leaves tiny craters across the surface, making the ground resemble a lunar landscape shaped by ancient impacts. In this quiet aftermath, life cautiously returns. Small mammals sniff the ground, birds hop across the ash, insects scuttle in confused patterns. Their movements leave faint impressions, delicate, temporary, destined to fade. But then comes something different. A small group of Australopithecus Afarensis approaches the area. Perhaps they are migrating. Perhaps searching for food or water. Or perhaps simply passing by, unaware that they are about to leave their most enduring legacy. They step onto the wet ash. The material compresses under their weight, forming clear, deep impressions. These are no random marks. They show a heel strike, a raised arch, toes aligned in a forward direction, the unmistakable signature of bipedal walking. One individual walks steadily, confidently. Another, smaller one walks alongside, their footprints overlapping at times, suggesting companionship or perhaps a parent and child. The trail stretches for nearly 30 meters, each step recording the rhythm of their movement, left, right, placid, unhurried, and astonishingly human-like. The cinematic beauty of this moment becomes more poignant when we imagine the individuals themselves. Their bodies are small, their strides modest, but their gait is remarkably similar to ours. Their arms hang at their sides, occasionally swinging gently for balance. Their heads shift to scan their surroundings for predators. They walk as a unit, showing the subtle cohesion that defines social species. They do not know that the ash they cross has the perfect moisture to record their passage. They do not know that a second layer of ash will soon fall, covering and protecting their footprints. They do not know that their simple act of walking will echo louder and longer than any roar, any storm, any geological shift around them. Another volcanic tremor shakes the ground days later. A new eruption sends additional ash raining down, sealing the footprints beneath a protective layer. Everything that walked across that surface, gazelles, birds, hyenas, and hominins, has its movements preserved in extraordinary detail. Time eventually hardens the ash into tuff, turning these fleeting steps into stone. For millions of years, they remain hidden, untouched by erosion, shielded by layers of earth. Nature forgets no detail, not the angle of a heel, not the spacing of toes, not the weight distribution of a hominin learning to walk confidently upright. Fast forward to 1976. A team led by Mary Leakey arrives in the region, searching for evidence of early hominins. They discover a set of impressions unlike any they have ever found, 3 parallel trails of footprints, astonishingly clear, unmistakably bipedal. When they brush away the protective sediments, they uncover a sequence that feels almost alive. The volcanic ash, once soft like wet clay, now carries the oldest story ever written in footsteps. Scientifically, the Laetoli footprints confirm what Bones had long hinted at: Australopithecus Afarensis was a habitual, confident biped. The footprints reveal a stride that is not a clumsy experiment, but a deliberate, energy-efficient walk. They show a human-like gait with a well-defined heel-to-toe motion. They prove that our ancestors walked upright millions of years before the genus Homo emerged. These steps are not transitional, they are committed. They are the footprints of a lineage fully embracing bipedalism. Emotionally, however, the impact is greater than any scientific conclusion. To stand over those prints is to stand exactly where they stood. The ground beneath one's feet mirrors the ground beneath theirs. The shape of their foot, the curve of the arch, the spacing of the toes, resembles our own more closely than any other animal's. It becomes impossible not to feel a connection, a quiet recognition that these ancient beings walked with intentions, fears, hopes, and needs not entirely unlike ours. Interpretations of the Litoli tracks have led to profound reflections. Some scientists believe two individuals walked close together, one slightly smaller than the other, possibly a pair. Another footprint may belong to a third individual, lightly overstepping the prints ahead. The idea of familial bonds arises naturally from this arrangement. Were they a mother and her young? A male and female pair? A small family group? The footprints do not answer these questions, but they invite them. They encourage us to imagine early hominins not as isolated figures, but as social beings who moved through their world together. The footprints also reveal something deeper about the emotional landscape of early hominin life. Their stride is steady, not frantic. There is no sign of pursuit or flight. They walk calmly, perhaps in the mild warmth after rainfall, their feet spreading gently in the damp ash. There is peace in their movement, a rare window into a moment of safety in an otherwise dangerous world. It is a reminder that even in a harsh prehistoric environment, there were days of quiet, of connection, of shared paths. Philosophically, the Litoli footprints invite contemplation about memory and legacy. These hominins did not intend to leave a message for the future. They had no language, no tools, no concept of writing. Yet their simple act of walking became one of the most eloquent testimonies in all of human evolution. Their footprints say what bones cannot: we walked here. We lived. We moved forward. Without knowing it, they etched the beginning of our story onto the earth itself. As this section closes, we feel the emotional weight of those ancient steps. The Litoli footprints are more than preserved impressions, they are the earliest chapter of our journey printed in the ground. They remind us that walking upright was not just a biological adaptation, it was a defining behavior, shaped by environment, solidified by survival, and destined to change the course of life on Earth. Their footsteps are long gone from the ash, but their message endures: we stood up. We walked. And we never stopped. To understand Australopithecus Afarensis, we must view their body not as a finished design, but as an evolving negotiation, an anatomy still arguing with itself. Every bone, every curve, every joint reveals a history of conflict between two worlds, the canopy of the trees and the unpredictable expanse of the open ground. Their skeleton tells the story of a species caught mid-transformation, living in a body built for a past they had not yet left and a future they had not fully reached. This tension is visible in every part of Afarensis, creating a form that is as fascinating as it is transitional. Imagine their silhouette against the morning light. At first glance, the proportions feel familiar yet strange. Their upper body carries echoes of ape-like ancestors, long arms that nearly reach the knees, shoulders built for pulling rather than pushing, a chest that widens toward the top. These features reveal their climbing heritage, a past in which survival depended on gripping branches, swinging between trunks, and sleeping safely above ground. The curvature of their fingers, noticeably more pronounced than in modern humans, implies a life where the hands were still expected to bear weight and grasp securely. But then the form shifts. Move your gaze downward, and the story changes dramatically. Their hips flare with the broad, bowl-shaped structure characteristic of bipeds. This pelvic architecture is essential for supporting internal organs during upright walking. Their femurs angle inward, bringing knees close together beneath the body, stabilizing each step. Their legs may be short compared to ours, but they are powerful, designed to handle long-distance travel across rugged plains. This lower half unmistakably belongs to a walker. The spine deepens this duality. At the top, the vertebrae support a head that still juts forward slightly, indicating a posture not fully upright by modern standards. But farther down, the spinal column curves in gentle S-shapes, lumbar and cervical curves that help distribute weight and maintain balance. It is a spine evolving toward human form, shaped by the demands of an upright life while still retaining the robustness needed for climbing. The feet tell perhaps the most compelling part of the story. Unlike the grasping feet of apes, the feet of Afarensis bear the distinct imprint of bipedal adaptation: shorter toes, aligned in a forward direction, a converging big toe that creates a push-off mechanism similar to ours, and a partially developed arch that absorbs shock and aids propulsion. These are not the feet of tree dwellers alone, they are feet preparing for a future on the ground. Yet they retain some flexibility, hinting that climbing still plays a vital role in daily life. The result is a foot designed for versatility rather than specialization. Standing upright, an Afarensis individual looks both capable and vulnerable. Their center of gravity is lower than ours, giving them stability but limiting stride length. Their walking gait is efficient enough to travel long distances, but not as fluid or fast as modern humans. When they run, they likely rely on a combination of bipedal movement and bursts of quadrupedal agility when climbing becomes necessary. Evolution had not yet chosen a side, it had simply given them the tools to navigate a world where no single strategy guaranteed survival. This hybrid body affects their daily decisions. In dense woodland, climbing remains essential. Their long arms and flexible shoulders allow them to scramble up trees rapidly during predator encounters. In the canopy, they move with an ease modern humans cannot replicate. Their curved fingers hook effortlessly around branches, their strong upper body supporting their weight as they search for fruit or a safe sleeping place. But in open terrain, their bodies tell a different story. The structure of their pelvis, legs, and feet gives them advantages no ape possesses. They can walk farther with less energy, scan the horizon at greater heights, and carry objects, food, sticks, stones, or infants, without sacrificing mobility. These new possibilities reshape their behavior. They forage across wider areas, explore new habitats, and travel in more organized, coordinated groups. Their upright stance opens a world previously limited by the constraints of quadrupedal motion. Their ribs and chest add yet another layer of meaning. The ribcage of Afarensis is conical, similar to apes, suggesting powerful upper body musculature. But the lower ribs begin to narrow, a subtle shift toward the more cylindrical shape of humans. This change likely supports improved breathing mechanics for endurance walking. Their bodies are slowly optimizing for stamina, an adaptation that would later help the genus Homo master persistence hunting and long-distance travel. The skull, too, reflects this balancing act. The foramen magnum, the hole through which the spinal cord enters the skull, is positioned forward, aligning the head with a bipedal posture. Yet the face remains prognathic, jutting forward with a heavy jaw and powerful chewing muscles. Their diet required immense force, tough roots, fibrous plants, gritty soil-coated foods. Their bodies carried the evolutionary history of survival under harsh conditions, where every calorie mattered and every adaptation offered an advantage. From a philosophical perspective, the body of Australopithecus Afarensis embodies the courage of incompleteness. They are not perfectly adapted to any one environment, and yet this lack of perfection becomes their strength. Flexibility allows them to endure droughts, evade predators, and exploit diverse food sources. Their bodies teach us that evolution is not a quest for perfection but for resilience. Emotionally, there is something deeply relatable about this in-between form. They are creatures learning to walk confidently but still seeking refuge in trees. They are early humans without human minds, early apes without ape futures. Their bodies capture the essence of transition, a reminder that growth often requires existing in discomfort, inhabiting spaces where identities overlap. Imagine an Afarensis navigating a rocky slope. They place their feet carefully, using their arms for balance. When the ground steepens, they grab a branch and pull themselves upward. When the terrain flattens, they straighten and continue walking. Their movement is fluid in its adaptability, switching seamlessly between modes. They are neither bound by their past nor fully embraced by their future. They are becoming. By the end of this section, we see Australopithecus afarensis not as an anatomical puzzle, but as a living testament to evolution's creativity. Their body is a hybrid masterpiece, 1 foot in the trees, 1 foot on the ground, and a destiny walking toward humanity. Their form reveals the quiet genius of natural selection, forging a creature perfectly suited to survive in 2 worlds, even as those worlds pulled them in different directions. To understand Australopithecus afarensis, we must taste their world, not with our tongues, but with imagination. Their diet was not merely a list of foods, it was a daily negotiation with an environment that shifted unpredictably. Eating was survival, exploration, improvisation. Every bite reflected the challenges of a changing landscape, where forests retreated, grasslands expanded, and seasons behaved like unpredictable storytellers. What afarensis consumed shaped their bodies, guided their behaviors, and subtly nudged evolution toward pathways that would eventually define humans. Their menu was neither luxurious nor consistent. It was dictated by necessity. Unlike predators who relied on speed or precision, afarensis relied on creativity, picking, plucking, chewing, crushing, and sometimes scavenging. Their teeth tell the story: thick enamel, broad molars, and powerful jaws capable of grinding tough, resilient food sources. This was the anatomy of a survivor in a world where soft, easy foods could not be relied upon. Imagine a small group of afarensis foraging at dawn. The light is gentle, filtered through scattered woodland. They search for fallen fruits, figs, berries, or small pods left behind by birds or wind. These fruits are sweet but rare, available mostly during certain seasons. When fruit is abundant, it becomes their preferred food, easy to digest, high in energy, and accessible from both ground and tree. In these moments, the forest feels generous, almost kind. But generosity is fleeting in the Pliocene. The dry season arrives with no mercy. Leaves crumble, fruits disappear, and grasses turn brittle. The group must adapt. They turn to fallback foods, roots buried deep in soil, tubers requiring effort to extract, stems that are fibrous and unappetizing but life-saving. With their strong jaws, afarensis can crush plant fibers that would frustrate many other primates. Their digestive system is built for resilience, capable of extracting nutrients from tough vegetation. They also consume seeds, nuts, and the occasional insect. The sound of cracking nutshells echoes softly as individuals use stones to smash open hard shells, not as deliberate tools, but as opportunistic aids. This improvisational behavior reveals an important cognitive shift: the line between environment and object begins to blur. A stone isn't just part of the ground, it can become a means to access food. These early, unintentional steps toward tool use may seem small, but they represent the spark of innovation. During certain seasons, grasses become important too. The isotopic signatures in their teeth show that afarensis incorporated C4 grasses and sedges into their diet, foods modern humans rarely eat without processing. But for these early hominins, grass blades, shoots, and rhizomes offered a vital buffer against hunger. Their bodies adapted to extract what they needed from what the land provided. Occasionally, they may have scavenged small animals or insects. A carcass left behind by a predator becomes an opportunity, a chance to eat marrow, soft tissues, or insects clustering around remains. These moments are rare but significant. They introduce the idea of exploring beyond the plant world, accessing new sources of fat and protein. This behavior hints at an early curiosity, a willingness to try what is available, even if it is unfamiliar. Their diet also influenced their movement. Groups traveled based on food availability, sometimes covering long distances to find better foraging grounds. The need to find diverse foods encouraged them to explore both trees and open plains. Climbing remained essential for accessing fruits, honey, and certain leaves. Walking upright helped them travel efficiently between food patches. Their hybrid body was the result of a hybrid diet. In this daily search for sustenance, their emotional world becomes clear. For Afarensis, hunger was not just a physical sensation. It shaped their social patterns, their risk-taking behavior, their interactions with predators, and their seasonal movements. A mother carrying her infant while searching for edible roots faces dangers with every step. A male watching for threats as others forage must balance alertness with hunger. Juveniles learn by observation, mimicking adults as they taste different plants, sometimes grimacing at bitterness, other times discovering new foods. This constant trial and error shaped not only their diet but their cognition. To survive, Afarensis needed memory, which plants were toxic, which seasons offered certain fruits, which landscapes hid edible roots. They needed cooperation too. Groups shared knowledge, not through language, but through imitation, gesture, and proximity. A young individual who follows an experienced forager gains access to wisdom that improves survival. The environment also forced them to contend with variation. One year might bring abundant fruit, the next might bring drought. Adaptability became essential. Their flexible diet allowed them to survive in landscapes hostile to more specialized species. This flexibility is the hallmark of our lineage, an inherited trait that would later allow humans to occupy nearly every ecosystem on Earth. Philosophically, the diet of Australopithecus afarensis reflects the essence of evolution itself, the willingness to explore the unfamiliar, to adapt when the world shifts, to survive not through dominance but through resilience. Their meals were humble, often difficult to obtain, and far from the myth of primitive abundance. But these meals kept them alive, shaped their anatomy, and subtly pushed their behavior toward innovation. Imagine the end of a long day. A group settles in the shelter of a tree as evening approaches. Stomachs are not full, but satisfied enough to rest. The wind cools the land, carrying scents of distant vegetation. In this moment, quiet, vulnerable, unrecorded, they embody the resilience of their species. They endure because they adapt. They eat what the world gives, and when the world gives nothing, they search harder. Their diet is not just nourishment, it is a reflection of the journey from forest to savanna, from past to future. Through these foods, bitter, sweet, hard, soft, they forged the bodies and behaviors that would one day lead to us. The world of Australopithecus afarensis was not shaped only by landscapes, predators, or climate, it was shaped profoundly by each other. In a world filled with dangers far greater than themselves, survival depended on companionship, cooperation, and the subtle bonds formed within small, vulnerable groups. Their social lives were the quiet threads holding together the fragile fabric of their existence. Without one another, they would not have endured. With one another, they carved out the earliest blueprint of what would one day become human society. Imagine a group of Afarensis approaching a waterhole at dawn. They move in tight formation, not by conscious strategy but through instinctive cohesion. The smallest individuals stay near the center, flanked by older females and juveniles who already understand the unspoken rules of safety. A large male lingers at the rear, scanning for movement in the tall grass. Every gesture, glance, and posture carries meaning. They rely on one another not through language, but through presence. These groups likely ranged from 5 to 15 individuals, small enough to move together through trees and shrubs, large enough to intimidate some predators. Unlike solitary primates, Afarensis gained strength from numbers. Their survival depended on an early form of community, shaped not by culture but by necessity. At the heart of these groups were females, their infants clinging to their fur or resting in the crooks of their arms as they foraged. The presence of multiple mothers created a network of shared vigilance. When one foraged with her head lowered, another kept watch. When one sensed danger, tension rippled silently through the group before any predator appeared. These instincts were ancestral versions of caregiving and cooperation, behaviors that would later blossom into the emotional richness of human social bonds. Social grooming likely played a central role. Though lacking the complexity of human affection or moral intention, grooming served as both hygiene and communication. Fingers comb through tangled fur, picking out insects and debris. A juvenile relaxes under the gentle touch of an elder. Two adults groom each other after a stressful encounter, reinforcing bonds that reduce future conflict. These simple acts were the first threads of empathy stitched into the heart of our lineage. Dominance existed, but in a primitive form. Larger males held certain advantages: access to food patches, protection roles, or competition during mating seasons. Yet these hierarchies were not the rigid structures seen in some later primates. The social order of Afarensis likely shifted with circumstances, hunger, threat, or injury. Strength mattered, but cooperation mattered more. A dominant male still needed his group to survive, and the group needed him. Evolution was quietly teaching balance. Conflict, of course, was inevitable. With limited resources and high tension in the wild, disputes occurred, over food, sleeping spots, or mating opportunities. In these moments, their bodies speak louder than any imagined vocalization. A raised arm, a widened stance, a quick step forward to intimidate. Most disputes probably ended without physical violence. Energy was too precious to waste. But when clashes did occur, they left marks, healed fractures found in fossils, bite marks, and skeletal injuries hinting at a world where even social relationships carried risks. Yet conflict was only one side of their social life. The other was protection. When a predator appeared, whether a saber-toothed cat or a massive canine hyena, the group reacted as one. Mothers grabbed their young, individuals clustered into tight formations. Those with climbing strength moved upward first, infants clinging tightly, while others followed. A solitary Afarensis stood little chance against the predators of the Pliocene. But together, their alertness, noise, and numbers offered a slim but crucial edge. Their social intelligence grew in these moments. They learned to interpret warnings from others, a quick glance from a group member, a tightening of muscles, the sudden freezing of an individual staring into the distance. This ability to read intention, to anticipate danger based on the reactions of others, laid the groundwork for more complex communication in later species. They were not speaking, but they were listening with their eyes, their posture, their intuition. Play was another key aspect of their social fabric. Juveniles chased each other between branches or rolled in dust near their elders. They practiced balance, tested climbing skills, and learned spatial awareness. Play also helped form social bonds that would matter later in adulthood. A young Afarensis who played with peers would grow into an adult with allies, with familiarity, with trust. These early games were the seeds of the social cohesion that would eventually lead our species to develop friendship, cooperation, and companionship. Even resting carried social importance. After a long day of foraging, the group gathered in trees or dense branches. They huddled close, body heat shared against the cooling night, infants sleeping pressed to their mothers' chests. There was comfort in proximity, safety in numbers, and a primitive sense of peace. Nightfall was one of the few moments when vulnerability turned into stillness rather than danger. Their social interactions were also shaped by the challenges of parenthood. Infants were completely dependent, unable to cling for long distances without being carried, unable to forage, unable to climb safely on their own. Mothers bore the weight, literally and metaphorically, of raising the next generation. Fathers may or may not have been involved directly, but males likely contributed to group protection and resource access. This dynamic set the stage for the evolving roles of caregivers in later hominins. Philosophically, the social life of Australopithecus afarensis represents the beginning of something profound, the idea that survival is not a solitary pursuit. These creatures did not know compassion, empathy, or love as humans understand them, but the seeds of those emotions existed within their interactions. Their reliance on one another planted the earliest roots of community. We often imagine early humans as isolated wanderers, but the truth is that our journey was shaped by togetherness long before language or tools entered the picture. Emotionally, it is moving to picture them, huddled under a tree during a sudden storm, juveniles clinging to elders, adults scanning the horizon while rain falls on their faces. They depended on each other not out of choice but out of instinct. And yet, this instinct would eventually give rise to the rich, interconnected social worlds humans now inhabit. As this section closes, the image of Afarensis standing together, small in number but strong in unity, becomes a symbol of survival itself. They lived in a world that offered little mercy, yet they endured through cooperation. Strength in small numbers became their greatest advantage. And in these early social bonds, we see the first glimmers of what would one day make us human. For Australopithecus Afarensis, the world was not merely a place to explore, it was a battlefield of survival where danger lurked in every shifting shadow. The tall grasses of the Pliocene savanna concealed predators with precision and patience. Every step taken by an early hominin was layered with tension, every sound a possible warning. To live in this world was to carry fear as a constant companion, shaping behavior, movement, and even evolution itself. Predators were not rare encounters, they were woven into the rhythm of daily life. Imagine the landscape at midday. The sun bakes the earth, shimmering waves rising from the ground. The tall grasses sway gently, disguising the presence of creatures both large and silent. A small group of Afarensis moves cautiously, scanning the horizon for signs of danger. Their eyes dart toward rustling grass, toward distant shapes, toward shadows that move against the wind. They do not possess weapons. They do not have the size or strength to fight back. Their greatest defenses are awareness, speed in climbing, and the safety of numbers. Among their most formidable enemies were saber-toothed cats, sleek, powerful hunters who could ambush with incredible speed. These predators relied on stealth, using tall grass as cover until the final explosive leap. To an Afarensis, the silent approach of such a hunter was almost impossible to detect. Only the sudden shift in the behavior of birds, or the quick disappearance of nearby antelope, hinted at approaching doom. The group's survival relied on reading environmental cues long before the predator became visible. Hyenas, though slower, were no less dangerous. Ancient hyenas were larger and more aggressive than modern species, equipped with bone-crushing jaws capable of killing or scavenging with terrifying efficiency. They hunted in packs, coordinating their movement to surround prey. For a solitary hominin, encountering a hyena pack meant certain death. The scent of blood could draw them from great distances, and their persistence made them relentless threats. Crocodiles also posed lethal danger, especially near rivers and lakes where Afarensis sought water. These massive reptiles waded beneath murky surfaces, invisible until the moment they lunged. A quick drink could turn into a fatal mistake. The splash of water, the snap of jaws, and the struggle beneath the surface were all too common scenes in the world of early hominins. Water sources, essential for survival, were approached with extreme caution, sometimes only visited at dawn or twilight, when crocodile activity was lower. Large birds of prey added yet another layer of threat, especially for infants and juveniles. Their sharp talons and incredible speed allowed them to snatch smaller individuals who strayed too far from the group. Fossil evidence of cranial injuries in early hominins suggests these aerial predators were a real danger, forcing adults to remain vigilant and protective at all times. Even high in the trees, safety was relative, leopards and large snakes could climb with ease. The presence of so many predators shaped the daily rhythms of Afarensis. They likely preferred to forage in areas with partial tree cover, where the canopy offered quick escape routes. Tall grasses were both a blessing and a curse, their abundance meant food, but they also provided hiding places for hunters. Open plains were traversed swiftly, rarely without tension. Every foraging trip was a calculated risk, balancing the need for calories with the need to stay alive. Predators also influenced their sleeping habits. Nights were the most dangerous time. Under the cover of darkness, large cats became bold, and hyenas wandered freely. To survive, Afarensis sought refuge in trees or on elevated rocky ledges. The climb required agility and strength, but it provided protection against nighttime hunters. High branches cradled them as they slept in groups, huddled together for warmth and security. Their nighttime world was filled with distant roars, growls, and cracking bones, sounds that reminded them of their fragile place in the ecosystem. Fear shaped their psychology, sharpening instincts that would eventually contribute to the development of more complex awareness in later hominins. Their eyes evolved to read movement quickly. Their ears tuned to the faintest crack of a twig. Their minds learned to anticipate danger based on patterns, the sudden silence of insects, the unexpected flight of birds, or the way grazing animals froze and stared in one direction. These cues formed an early, primitive form of pattern recognition, an essential precursor to intelligence. From a philosophical standpoint, predators played a strange role in shaping our ancestry. They were destroyers, but also sculptors. The constant threat they posed strengthened social cohesion among Afarensis. Groups that stayed together survived together. Individuals who sensed danger earlier kept their companions safe. Those who climbed faster or reacted quicker passed on their genes. Predators enforced evolution with brutal efficiency. Emotionally, it is haunting to imagine an Afarensis mother clutching her infant while scanning the grass for signs of movement. Her heart pounds as she listens for the rustle that might signal an approaching cat. The infant clings tightly, sensing her tension. The group's members gather closer, their breaths quiet and controlled. These scenes, raw, silent, filled with ancient fear, were the reality of their existence. Fear did not paralyze them. It sharpened them. It reminded them that they belonged to a world older, wilder, and far more dangerous than ours. Yet within that danger lay resilience. They learned when to move, when to freeze, when to climb, and when to flee. Their behavior was a choreography of survival, refined by countless encounters with predators who saw them as prey. As this section concludes, the tall grasses of the savanna become more than scenery, they become a symbol. A reminder that early hominins lived with constant vulnerability, surrounded by creatures faster, stronger, and deadlier than themselves. And yet, they endured. They adapted. They learned to read the signs of the land, to trust each other, and to find brief moments of calm in a world full of threats. In the end, their survival was not just a testament to strength, but to awareness, unity, and the quiet bravery required to live every day in the shadow of predators. Before stone tools appeared in the archaeological record, before sharp flakes and hand axes shaped the destiny of our lineage, there existed a quieter, less visible period of innovation, one defined not by craftsmanship, but by improvisation. Australopithecus Afarensis, living more than 1 million years before the first known stone tools, was already experimenting with objects in ways that hinted at the future. These early hominins were not toolmakers, but tool users in the most instinctive sense. Their world required creativity long before technology arrived, and survival often depended on simple actions that blurred the line between environment and instrument. Imagine an Afarensis individual kneeling by a fallen tree trunk. Beneath the bark hides a treasure, insects rich with fat and protein. But the bark is tough, resistant. The hominin searches the ground, finds a sturdy stick, and uses it to pry open the wood. The gesture is not refined, not deliberate innovation, it is instinctual, practical, and effective. The bark cracks, insects scatter, and the individual scoops them up before they escape. In this moment, the stick becomes more than a piece of wood. It becomes a tool, a solution to a problem hidden in the natural world. These acts were not rare. Fossil wear patterns on the teeth of Afarensis suggest they consumed a wide range of foods that would have required digging, breaking, or scraping. Sticks, stones, bones, anything that could be grasped, may have served as an extension of their bodies. They did not shape these objects with intention, but they used them with purpose. This is the dawn of instrumental behavior, the spark that would one day ignite the technological explosion of the genus Homo. The environment itself encouraged such creativity. Roots buried deep beneath soil required effort to access. Tough nuts demanded pressure to crack. Thorny plants needed stripping. Insects hid inside logs or underground chambers. Opportunity lay everywhere, but so did difficulty. Hands evolved for climbing became hands for grasping objects in new ways. The thumb of Afarensis, though not as dexterous as ours, was capable of holding sticks firmly. Their curved fingers wrapped easily around branches or stones, allowing them to lift, drop, or strike objects when necessary. Consider a group of Afarensis approaching a carcass abandoned by a predator. Their noses detect the scent of meat, rare, precious nourishment. But the skin is thick, the bones hard. They cannot tear flesh with their teeth alone. One individual lifts a rock and drops it repeatedly onto a bone, cracking it open to expose marrow. The action is simple but profound. Without conscious intent to invent, they have performed one of the earliest forms of tool-assisted scavenging. The behavior is opportunistic, but it reveals an essential shift in perception. An object can change the outcome of a challenge. These moments of ingenuity were not isolated acts of survival, they were early expressions of cognition. Each time an Afarensis used a stick to dig or a stone to smash, they engaged in problem-solving. They assessed their environment, recognized obstacles, and used available resources to overcome them. This is the foundation of technological intelligence. Though their abilities were limited, their minds were slowly expanding into territory no other primate had explored. The social dimension of these behaviors adds another layer of complexity. Young members of the group watched adults interact with objects, learning through imitation. A juvenile observes an elder using a branch to pull fruit closer and attempts the same action. Another watches as a stone is used to break open a tough seed pod and soon tries their own awkward version. These early learning moments were the seeds of cultural transmission. Simple, quiet, barely noticeable, but they planted the roots of eventual human teaching. Even without true tools, Afarensis displayed behaviors that foreshadowed future innovation. They selected specific stones for weight and grip, even if they did not intentionally shape them. They used branches stripped of leaves to probe termite mounds. They lifted rocks to flush out small prey. They likely used natural shelters, caves, crevices, or fallen logs, not only for protection but as strategic places to break open food or escape predators. These acts formed a new relationship between early hominins and their environment. Instead of passively adapting to nature's offerings, Afarensis began interacting with the world in active, experimental ways. The landscape became a toolkit waiting to be explored. Rivers provided stones, forests provided branches, savannas offered bones and sticks, and each object carried potential depending on the creativity of the individual who found it. Emotionally, it is striking to imagine the earliest sparks of innovation, not lightning flashes of genius, but small, hesitant experiments. A young Afarensis plays with a rock, tossing it repeatedly. Another taps two stones together, producing a sound that captures their attention. They do not know they are ancestors of toolmakers, yet these motions contain the essence of curiosity, exploration, and possibility. These behaviors also contributed to their survival in a world dominated by predators. A stone thrown in panic could distract a predator for a crucial second. A stick waved in fear might make a hominin appear larger or more threatening. Early hominins did not win battles, but they could confuse, delay, or deter. These gestures, while crude, were early forms of using objects for defense, behavior that would later transform into purposeful weapon-making. Philosophically, the pre-tool world of Afarensis represents the dawn of agency. They did not simply accept the conditions of their environment, they interacted with it, altered it, and used it to their advantage. These early improvisations remind us that intelligence is not born in a moment. It grows slowly, through countless tiny choices repeated over millennia. As this section concludes, one picture becomes clear: Australopithecus Afarensis lived in a world where survival required creativity long before technology existed. Their actions were not inventions, but adaptations, quiet, instinctual, and essential. In their hands, sticks and stones were not tools, but possibilities. And those possibilities became the first steps toward the technological journey that would one day define humanity. In the world of Australopithecus Afarensis, childhood was not a period of innocence, it was a fragile bridge between survival and vulnerability. Every young life balanced on the edge of danger, dependent wholly on the vigilance, strength, and compassion of adults. And yet, despite the challenges, childhood was also a time of discovery, imitation, and the earliest sparks of learning that would quietly shape the evolution of the human mind. To understand these young hominins is to witness the foundational roots of empathy, parental care, and the delicate beginnings of social learning. Imagine a newborn Afarensis, scarcely able to cling to its mother, its fingers gripping her fur with trembling persistence. Its eyes, wide and curious, scan a world full of unfamiliar shapes, towering grasses, shifting shadows, distant predators. The infant knows only warmth, heartbeat, and the safety of arms. For months, it remains attached to its mother almost constantly, a living burden she carries as she climbs, walks, forages, and navigates the daily risks of the Rift Valley. Every movement she makes must be careful, balanced, mindful of the delicate life pressed against her chest. Motherhood for Afarensis was physically demanding. With limited access to calorie-rich foods and a body not yet optimized for the energy efficiency humans enjoy, every additional kilogram of weight mattered. An infant could not walk on its own for a long time, its legs were weak, its coordination untested. The mother's arms, hips, and back bore the weight day after day. Yet this constant contact formed a bond so essential that without it, the infant stood little chance of survival. The father's role is harder to define. He may not have offered direct parental care, but protection and group vigilance created an environment where infants could grow. Males kept watch at the back of the group, monitored threats, and sometimes intervened when predators approached. Their presence, whether deliberate or instinctual, contributed to the fragile stability that allowed young Afarensis to survive long enough to learn. Juvenile life was both a privilege and a peril. Once old enough to cling tightly and move short distances on their own, young Afarensis experimented with movement in ways adults could not afford. They climbed low branches with enthusiasm, testing the grip of their fingers and the flexibility of their limbs. They chased each other in circles around bushes, hopping awkwardly on two legs before dropping to all fours in bursts of playful energy. Play was not just entertainment, it was practice. Each stumble taught balance. Each chase refined coordination. Each climb nurtured spatial awareness. Through these playful interactions, young individuals learned the subtleties of life, which branches could be trusted, which plants were edible, which sounds signaled danger. Older juveniles often took on the role of informal guides, showing the younger ones how to navigate certain trees, where insects could be found, or how to groom safely. These early exchanges represent the roots of teaching, not through language, but through action. At the center of childhood was imitation. Young Afarensis watched their mothers forage, watched adults break open tough pods with stones, watched how elders scanned for predators before descending trees. Learning was observational, absorbed silently through repetition and curiosity. A juvenile trying to mimic an adult's movement might struggle at first, fumbling with a stick, misjudging a balance point, or grasping fruit clumsily. But over time, these attempts built the foundations of survival, foundations that later species would refine into culture and knowledge transmission. Yet for all its moments of discovery, childhood was also brutally risky. Predators targeted the smallest and weakest members of the group. A juvenile wandering too far could be snatched by a large bird of prey or a lurking cat. Adults were constantly alert, scanning not just for their own safety but for the vulnerable young who could not yet recognize danger. Infants clung tightly during moments of fear, their tiny bodies trembling against their mothers' chests. Such scenes likely occurred daily, imprinting fear and caution into young minds long before they understood what predators were. Environmental dangers added to the hazards of childhood. Sudden storms, floods, falling branches, and unstable terrain posed threats no less deadly than predators. A misjudged step could mean a fall from a tree. A sudden crack of thunder could cause panic, scattering the group across dangerous ground. The young learned quickly that the world was unpredictable, and that survival meant staying close, watching closely, and learning constantly. Despite these hardships, childhood allowed Afarensis to develop social bonds that shaped their emotional lives. Juveniles formed small subgroups within the larger group structure, clusters of playmates who grew together, learned together, and relied on one another as they matured. These early friendships, built on shared curiosity and mutual dependence, were precursors to the deeper social connections that would later define human evolution. Emotionally, childhood moments could include brief flashes of joy, soft grooming from a mother, playful wrestling with siblings, or curious exploration of a new area. These moments were short-lived but meaningful, offering glimpses of the emotional complexity that would one day flourish in human empathy. Philosophically, childhood in Afarensis tells a profound truth about our lineage, that learning, bonding, and vulnerability have always shaped our species more deeply than strength or aggression. The long dependence of infants forced adults to protect, nurture, and cooperate. This extended juvenile period is one of the reasons intelligence expanded in our lineage. It demanded a brain capable of absorbing vast information over many years. By the time a young Afarensis approached adolescence, its body had grown strong enough to navigate both the trees and the ground with increasing confidence. It knew the group's routines, the dangers of the land, and the secrets of foraging. It had watched its elders solve problems, had learned to sense the moods of others, and had experienced the quiet power of social bonds. As this section closes, the image of childhood becomes clear, not soft, not sheltered, but essential. Childhood was a crucible where instincts sharpened, relationships formed, and the first threads of intelligence were woven. Through their young, Australopithecus Afarensis carried not only the promise of survival, but the faint, early whisper of what humanity would one day become. For Australopithecus Afarensis, the environment was not a backdrop, it was an unpredictable force that shaped every breath, every movement, every instinct. They lived in a world where seasons were not gentle transitions but violent swings of abundance and scarcity. Drought stretched for months, storms broke the sky with fury, and sudden shifts in climate reshaped landscapes overnight. Survival meant reading the language of weather long before the threat arrived. In this world, nature was both giver and taker, nurturing life one moment and threatening it the next. Imagine the early morning during the dry season. The air tastes of dust. The sun rises with a harsh, unforgiving light that casts long shadows across cracked earth. Pools that once teemed with life have evaporated into barren mudflats. Trees stand gaunt and impatient, shedding their last leaves in defeat. The group of Afarensis moves slowly, their bodies coated with a fine layer of dust swept up by the wind. Every step kicks up pale clouds. Their eyes squint against the glare, their mouths are dry. Thirst becomes a constant ache, a problem that cannot be ignored. Drought was among the greatest enemies these early hominins faced. Waterholes shrank or vanished entirely. Rivers retreated into thin, winding streams. Animals migrated over long distances, forcing Afarensis to follow or adapt. The group traveled farther than usual, using precious energy in search of moisture and edible vegetation. Even food changed during drought. Fruits disappeared, leaves grew tougher, and roots became buried deeper in hardened soil. Only the strongest individuals could dig for them, and even then, the effort was exhausting. During these dry months, survival became a race between endurance and depletion. The young suffered the most. Their small bodies lost water quickly. Mothers struggled to produce enough milk. The group moved carefully, resting under the sparse shade of acacia trees whenever the heat became unbearable. They learned to interpret the wind, when it blew hot and steady, danger was near; when it shifted, carrying the scent of distant moisture, hope stirred. The environment tested them endlessly, forging resilience that would be etched into the future of humanity. But then, after the long torment of drought, the sky would change. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, towering and heavy. The wind shifted again, cooler this time, carrying the promise of renewal. The distant rumble of thunder rolled across the land like the roar of a giant awakening. Storms approached with ferocity. Lightning slashed the sky as rain finally poured down, not gently, but in violent sheets that battered the earth. The rain transformed the world within hours. Parched soil turned to mud. Dry riverbeds filled rapidly, sometimes dangerously. The smell of wet earth rose into the air, rich and intoxicating after months of dryness. The group of Afarensis watched cautiously from the shelter of rocks or low branches. Storms were life-giving, but also deadly. Flash floods surged without warning, sweeping away anything in their path, debris, animals, or unfortunate hominins caught too close to the rising water. Yet when the storm calmed, the valley blossomed. Grass sprouted in tender shoots. Trees regained their strength. Insects emerged in swarms, birds sang, and herds returned to graze. For Afarensis, this transformation was a relief, but also a reminder of how quickly conditions could change. They foraged eagerly, filling their stomachs after weeks of scarcity. Mothers drank deeply, replenishing their strength. Juveniles played in softened earth, splashing at shallow puddles. Life returned with vigor, but always under the watchful eye of the sky. Seasonal cycles shaped their behavior in more ways than food and water. They shaped movement. During wet months, the group often stayed near newly formed water sources, taking advantage of the abundance. During dry months, they followed ancient, instinctual paths across savannas in search of resources. These migrations were not long-distance journeys like later hominin migrations, but they were essential within their local landscapes. Their survival depended on understanding rhythms, plant cycles, rainfall patterns, animal migrations. These patterns were not understood intellectually but instinctively. The tilt of the sun, the smell of the air, the chorus of insects, the behavior of nearby animals, all these clues whispered secrets about the changing seasons. Afarensis learned to pay attention. Awareness became a vital adaptation. In a world where climate shifted dramatically, those who sensed the signs survived long enough to pass on their genes. Extreme weather events were not rare. Occasionally, volcanic ash darkened the sky, blocking sunlight and cooling temperatures temporarily. Other times, strong winds swept through the valley, bending trees and scattering debris across the plains. Lightning struck dry vegetation, igniting small fires that forced groups to flee or reroute. These fires, while frightening, also cleared old vegetation, allowing new growth to appear. Nature was not consistently benevolent, but it had its cycles of destruction and renewal. In philosophical terms, Afarensis lived in a world that demanded both adaptability and humility. They could not control the forces around them, they could only respond. Their existence was shaped by an intimate dialogue with the environment, one that required constant attention and resilience. These challenges forged behaviors, instincts, and psychological patterns that would eventually underpin human adaptability on a global scale. Emotionally, one can imagine the quiet anxiety that gripped the group during environmental extremes. A mother holding her infant tighter as the sun beat down. Adults climbing to higher ground to escape rising waters. Juveniles pressing close to elders as thunder shook the sky. These were moments of fear, but also moments of unity. The elements, harsh as they were, strengthened social bonds. They shared shade, shared discoveries of water, shared warnings about storms. Nature forced them into cooperation long before they had the cognitive tools to understand it. Yet not all moments were filled with strain. There were days when the landscape felt gentle, when grasses shimmered under soft breezes, when small flowers dotted the ground, when the air smelled of freshness after rain. On those days, Afarensis enjoyed rare tranquility. They groomed, rested, and fed without urgency. Juveniles explored freely. Even adults relaxed their vigilance slightly. These moments, however brief, offered emotional rest in a world defined by constant vigilance. As this section draws to a close, the portrait becomes clear. Australopithecus afarensis lived in an environment ruled by extremes, crushing droughts, violent storms, shifting seasons. But instead of breaking them, these forces shaped them. Their bodies, behaviors, and instincts evolved to meet the demands of a world where survival depended on resilience, awareness, and adaptability. Weather was not just climate, it was destiny. And through every drought endured, every storm survived, every season learned, Afarensis carried humanity one step closer to becoming a species capable of outlasting the changing world. Long before language, before symbols, before the spark of culture illuminated the human story, there existed the quiet, growing minds of Australopithecus afarensis, minds small in volume but expanding in possibility. To understand these early walkers, we must step into a consciousness that was neither ape nor human, neither instinct-driven alone nor reflective in the human sense. Their mental world was a place of intuition, memory, emotion, and rising complexity, a cognitive landscape shaped by survival, social bonds, and the unpredictable earth they navigated. Imagine an afarensis perched on a low branch, scanning the savanna below. The brain inside its skull is roughly one-third the size of a modern human brain, closer to that of a chimpanzee, but it is not the same. Subtle reorganizations are underway. Neural circuits responsible for spatial awareness, social recognition, and decision-making are becoming more refined. This small hominin is learning to interpret the world with eyes that see patterns, ears that detect intention in movement, and a memory that holds on to experiences long enough to inform the next choice. Their cognition begins with survival. Every day demands decisions: when to descend from a tree, when to stay hidden, when to cross open ground, when to approach a waterhole. These decisions require the ability to weigh risks, recall past encounters, and anticipate outcomes. A mind incapable of such mental balancing would not survive long in a world filled with predators, volatile weather, and scarce resources. Spatial memory plays a crucial role. An afarensis knows where certain fruiting trees grow, remembers which paths lead to safe resting spots, and recognizes areas frequented by predators. This memory is not abstract but deeply embedded in sensory experience: the smell of a specific tree, the sight of a unique rock formation, the texture of soil underfoot. Their minds store landscapes like maps carved from sensory impressions. Social cognition shapes their world as well. They recognize individuals in their group: mothers, siblings, juveniles, dominant males. They remember past interactions: who groomed whom, who shared food nearby, who displayed aggression. This memory forms the basis of trust and caution. A juvenile who recalls which adult protected them during danger behaves differently than one who remembers being pushed aside. These small, instinctual judgments guide social behavior and strengthen group cohesion. Communication operates through gestures, facial expressions, vocalizations, and posture. Their minds interpret slight changes in body language: a tensed limb, a widened eye, a sudden turn of the head, as meaningful signals. A soft grunt might indicate reassurance, a sharp call might signal danger. Their communication is not symbolic, but it is effective, and it requires minds capable of reading intention. But beyond survival and social life, there is curiosity. Curiosity is the spark that separates a reactive mind from an exploratory one. Afarensis individuals investigate unusual sounds, unfamiliar objects, and new plants not merely for immediate benefit, but because their brains are wired to seek information. A young individual who discovers an insect nest under bark learns from experience; another who sees an adult break open a fruit imitates the behavior. Curiosity fuels learning, and learning fuels innovation. Their minds also contain emotion. Fear is the most powerful, an immediate, visceral response to predators, storms, or separation from the group. But other emotions exist too: relief after finding water, contentment during grooming, frustration when a branch breaks or food becomes scarce, excitement during play. These emotions shape decision-making and reinforce behaviors that ensure survival. Imagine a young Afarensis navigating a tree for the first time without assistance. Their heart beats rapidly. The unfamiliar height triggers caution. They test each branch, learning through trial and error. Success becomes rewarding, failure sharpens awareness. This interplay between emotion and experience builds neural pathways that strengthen cognitive ability. One of the most remarkable aspects of Afarensis cognition is their ability to plan in simple but meaningful ways. Planning might mean carrying food to a safer place before eating, or choosing a sleeping tree based on past predator encounters. It might mean gathering near a water source at sunrise rather than midday. These tiny decisions, barely noticeable, represent the early beginnings of foresight. Yet their cognition also has limits. They cannot imagine the distant future or reflect on abstract concepts. They live in the immediate, reacting to the world as it unfolds. Their understanding is grounded entirely in the present moment and in memories shaped by direct sensory experiences. Still, within these limits lies a foundation. Afarensis minds are becoming capable of more complex thought patterns, forming the earliest seeds of what will grow into human awareness. Their neural development hints at the potential for eventual toolmaking, cooperation beyond instinct, and creative problem-solving. Emotionally, consider the moment when a mother loses sight of her infant. Panic surges. She vocalizes sharply, scanning the underbrush. The infant calls back, trembling but alive. The mother rushes toward the sound, scooping the infant into her arms. Their embrace is instinctive, necessary, and emotional in a primitive sense. Such moments reveal that attachment, one of humanity's deepest emotions, has its roots in these early ancestors. Their dreams, though impossible for us to know, must have reflected their waking lives. Sounds of predators, rustling branches, or remembered fear may have replayed in their minds. Sleep was not just rest, it was a time when neural connections strengthened, when memories consolidated, when the brain grew. Sleep contributed to cognitive advancement long before humans understood its value. Afarensis also shows signs of early problem-solving. A branch blocks access to a favored fruit cluster, an individual pushes it aside. Insects retreat deeper into a log, a stick becomes an extension of the hand. These moments suggest the beginnings of analogical thinking, the realization that one object can influence another. Though simple, this cognitive leap is profound. It marks the early shift from instinctual action to intentional action. Philosophically, the minds of Australopithecus Afarensis represent the earliest flickers of human consciousness, a flame not yet bright, but glowing. They lived without language yet communicated effectively. They lived without tools yet manipulated their environment. They lived without culture yet learned from one another. Their mental lives were not human, but they carried the potential that would one day allow humans to imagine, create, and understand the world in entirely new ways. As this section concludes, one thing becomes clear: the minds of early walkers were not empty vessels reacting blindly to stimuli. They were evolving systems of memory, emotion, intuition, and creativity. Their intelligence was quiet, but it was there, growing with every step across a changing world. Through their minds, they laid the groundwork for everything their descendants would become: thinkers, builders, storytellers, and eventually, the architects of civilizations. Life for Australopithecus afarensis was shaped not only by predators, climate, and hunger, but also by each other. Though cooperation formed the backbone of their social existence, conflict was an undeniable part of their world. In the harsh landscapes of the Pliocene, when food was scarce, when fear was constant, and when survival demanded fierce competition, violence sometimes broke through the fragile balance of group living. Conflict was not an anomaly, it was a natural, though dangerous, part of existence. Imagine a group of Afarensis gathered near a dwindling waterhole during the dry season. Their bodies are tense, dehydrated, and on edge. As they drink cautiously, another group approaches from the opposite direction. Both groups need the same resource. Neither wants to retreat. The air thickens with tension. A dominant male from one group stands upright, shoulders raised, making himself appear larger. A female from the other hisses sharply, pulling her juvenile closer. These gestures, though primitive, are full of meaning, warning, threat, desperation. The water source cannot support both groups. Conflict becomes inevitable. Physical confrontations among Afarensis were likely brief but intense. Their bodies, compact, muscular, and agile, were capable of powerful bursts of aggression. Researchers studying fractures in early hominin fossils have found injuries consistent with falls, bites, and blunt force trauma. Some may have been caused by predators, but others bear the signs of intraspecies conflict. A strike from a heavy arm, a shove from a rival, a fall from a height during a fight, these were real dangers within the social world of Afarensis. Competition over resources triggered many of these disputes. Food scarcity intensified aggression, especially during droughts when roots, fruits, and water were limited. Mothers protecting their infants might lash out defensively at others who ventured too close. Males competing for mating opportunities displayed strength, intimidation, and sometimes physical violence to assert dominance. Even juveniles engaged in rough play that occasionally escalated into genuine conflict. Yet violence in Afarensis was not constant. It flickered through their lives like lightning, brief, sharp, and dangerous. Most interactions were shaped by avoidance rather than confrontation. Posturing, vocalizations, and threat displays often resolved conflicts before they escalated. A raised arm, an aggressive leap, or a loud call could signal dominance without the risk of injury. Injuries were costly. A broken limb or deep wound could mean death in a world full of predators. Thus, Afarensis preferred to win conflicts through intimidation rather than actual fighting. Still, when aggression did erupt, it left marks. Imagine two males competing for a desirable fruiting tree. One approaches with confidence, the other refuses to yield. Their bodies tense. They circle one another, arms swinging slightly in anticipation. A sudden shove sends one tumbling. Dust rises. The conflict ends as quickly as it began, with the loser retreating and the victor claiming the prize. Such moments, though simple, shaped social hierarchies and influenced which individuals gained better access to resources. Competition was not limited to groups of the same species. Early hominins frequently encountered other animals competing for similar foods: baboons, antelopes, birds, and smaller primates. A troop of baboons might attempt to chase Afarensis away from a fruiting tree. The confrontation between species often involved loud vocalizations, displays of size, and attempts to intimidate. Sometimes Afarensis succeeded, other times they were chased off. These interactions further honed their awareness, teaching them which species to avoid and which strategies worked best in stressful encounters. Violence also touched the most vulnerable members of Afarensis groups, the infants. Predation was the primary threat, but accidental injuries from falls, rough play, or conflict among adults posed real dangers. Mothers guarded their infants closely, often placing themselves between the child and the source of tension. If a fight broke out nearby, a mother's priority was escape, not confrontation. Her arms tightened around her infant, her legs moved swiftly, her instincts directed her toward safety. Emotionally, these conflicts introduced stress, fear, and heightened vigilance. Afarensis likely experienced surges of adrenaline during confrontation, their hearts pounding, muscles tightening, senses sharpening. Tension within groups could linger after disputes, affecting grooming, proximity, and social interactions. Trust was fragile. Social harmony, once disrupted, took time to restore. Philosophically, these moments reveal that the roots of human conflict run deep. Violence did not emerge with humans, it existed in the earliest branches of our evolutionary tree. Yet so did restraint, negotiation, and resolution. Conflict among Afarensis teaches us that violence is not purely a product of advanced cognition or culture, it is an ancient, instinctual response to pressure. But just as ancient is the urge to avoid it, to preserve group cohesion, and to maintain peace whenever possible. Despite the presence of violence, cooperation remained the dominant force. A species as vulnerable as Afarensis could not survive if conflict overshadowed unity. Their social world was built on delicate balance, moments of tension countered by grooming, mutual foraging, protective behavior, and shared vigilance. Violence was a danger, but never the defining feature of their existence. As this section closes, we see Australopithecus Afarensis as creatures living with the full spectrum of primal emotions: fear, aggression, caution, and relief. Their conflicts were not moral or calculated, they were raw reactions to the pressures of survival. And within these struggles, we witness the continuity of a truth that spans millions of years: life, then and now, is shaped by both cooperation and conflict, by moments of unity and flashes of violence. These early confrontations left marks on their bones and impressions on their minds, shaping the evolution of our lineage in ways subtle and profound. Death followed Australopithecus Afarensis as closely as their own shadows. In a world where predators waited in silence, where accidents were common, and where the environment itself offered little mercy, death was not an exceptional event, it was woven into the rhythm of life. Yet for us, millions of years later, their deaths are often the only stories we can read clearly. Their bones, scattered across the Rift Valley and preserved by chance, speak a language long extinct. Through fractures, bite marks, wear patterns, and silent arrangements in the earth, we glimpse how they lived, how they died, and how their bodies told the truths their voices never could. Imagine a warm afternoon on the savannah. A lone Afarensis moves cautiously along a dry riverbed, searching for water. Predators have been active in the area, footprints of a large cat mark the mud. The hominin hesitates, heart pounding, scanning the grass. A sudden rustle, then silence. Moments later, there is a flash of movement, a leap, a struggle. Dust rises. When it settles, life has left the fragile body. Such scenes were common, though few left traces beyond scattered bones and the quiet imprint of predation. When paleontologists uncover fossils, many bear the unmistakable signature of predator encounters. Deep punctures from saber-toothed cats, gnaw marks from giant hyenas, and the crushing patterns made by crocodile jaws reveal how vulnerable Afarensis was. Some bones show evidence of being dragged, others of being broken open for marrow. The savanna was filled with hungry creatures, and Afarensis often became part of the food chain. Other injuries tell of falls, fractured arm bones consistent with slipping from trees, dislocated shoulders, broken ribs. Climbing was essential for safety, but it carried risks. A fall from a branch could crush bone, limit mobility, or become fatal if predators detected weakness. These fractures, when they healed, also reveal something remarkable. Some individuals survived for months after severe injuries, suggesting that group members helped protect or tolerate injured individuals. Even without language or sophisticated social structure, there was enough cohesion for the injured to remain with the group. Disease also left its mark, though subtly. Some bones show evidence of infections or developmental abnormalities. A malformed limb might have made walking difficult. A diseased jaw might have made chewing painful. Yet these individuals still reached adulthood. Their survival hints at a level of care within groups, perhaps not deliberate compassion, but at least tolerance and protection of the weak. This early glimmer of social support would one day blossom into the empathy characteristic of later hominins. One of the most haunting insights comes from the arrangement of certain fossil sites. Some clusters of bones, like those found at the first family site, suggest that entire groups may have died together. Whether from a sudden flood, a landslide, or a predator ambush, these mass deaths paint a tragic picture. Imagine a storm unleashing torrents of rain, turning dry gullies into raging floods. A group caught unaware could be swept away in moments. Their bodies buried under mud, preserved in positions that reflect their final struggle. Or imagine an unstable slope collapsing beneath them, trapping individuals too quickly to escape. These sudden catastrophes remind us of how fragile life was in their world. Sometimes, the bones speak of quieter deaths. A juvenile found curled in a natural depression, likely dying from illness or starvation. An older adult with worn teeth suggesting years of struggle with tough foods, eventually succumbing to exhaustion or lack of resources. These deaths reflect not violent encounters, but the slow, harsh reality of survival under constant pressure. The teeth of Afarensis provide an especially intimate view of their lives. Microscopic where patterns tell stories of diet, but they also reveal stress. Lines of arrested growth, called hypoplasia, suggest periods of famine or illness during childhood. These interruptions in enamel formation mark moments when the young body struggled to survive. Each line is a silent cry from the past, a reminder of hunger, drought, or disease. And yet, individuals with multiple lines often reached adulthood, showing their resilience in the face of hardship. Even the bones of infants reveal narratives of fragility and care. Tiny femurs and skull fragments indicate that many infants did not survive long after birth, a reality common among early hominins. Their remains are rare, not because they were few, but because their delicate bones seldom fossilized. The survival of the few that did makes them especially precious windows into the earliest stages of life and loss. Philosophically, the bones of Australopithecus Afarensis remind us of the raw continuity of life and death. These early hominins lived without rituals or beliefs about the afterlife. Death was not a mystery to ponder, it was an ever-present fact. Their reaction to death was likely instinctual: fear, avoidance, confusion. A group encountering the body of a fallen member might inspect it briefly, then move on. And yet, even in their simple reactions, there is something profoundly emotional. A mother lingering near the body of her lost infant. A juvenile circling an injured adult with uncertainty. We cannot know their thoughts, but their bodies tell us enough. Death shaped their behaviors just as it shaped their evolution. Emotionally, there is something deeply human about reading these ancient remains. We look at broken bones and imagine lives interrupted. We see bite marks and imagine sudden terror. We find healed fractures and imagine perseverance. In these fragments, we recognize a continuity between their struggles and our own. Death, for Afarensis, was not the end of a story, it was part of the story. And through death, they left behind the clues that allow us to reconstruct their existence millions of years later. As this section closes, one image remains: the bones of Australopithecus afarensis lying in ancient earth, touched by sun, buried by dust, guarded by time. These bones, silent yet eloquent, remind us that every step forward in human evolution was paid for with vulnerability, loss, and resilience. Death shaped their world, but it also preserved their story, carried through the ages by the very earth that once claimed their lives. On a hot afternoon in November 1974, in the dusty badlands of Hadar, Ethiopia, the earth revealed a secret it had protected for 3.2 million years. A small fragment of bone, a piece of elbow, caught the sunlight and caught the eye of paleoanthropologist Donald Johanson. That moment, humble and unassuming, marked the beginning of one of the most transformative discoveries in the history of human evolution. The skeleton they would soon uncover, fragile, partial, but astonishingly complete, would not only reshape scientific understanding, but profoundly shift how we view our origins. She would be named Lucy. To appreciate the magnitude of this discovery, we must first picture the landscape where it happened. The Afar Triangle in the 1970s was a harsh place, dry, rugged, and blisteringly hot. But beneath its desolate appearance lay sedimentary layers filled with fossils. For millions of years, ancient rivers, volcanic eruptions, and shifting landforms had buried and preserved remnants of early life. Fossils surfaced slowly as erosion peeled back layers of time. Researchers flocked to the region because they believed Africa held the key to our evolutionary past. But no one expected what would emerge from this particular field of stones and sand. When Johansen bent to examine the first bone fragment, he immediately recognized its significance. It was human-like, but far too ancient to belong to Homo sapiens. A few meters away, another bone appeared, a section of skull. Then a fragment of rib. Then a vertebra. The team began to realize they had stumbled upon something extraordinary, the partial remains of a single individual who lived more than 3 million years ago. As they continued excavating, the pieces accumulated. A pelvis, surprisingly intact. A femur angled just like a biped's. A jawbone with teeth worn down by a lifetime of chewing tough vegetation. Each fragment told a story of movement, diet, struggle, and survival. And together, they became a portrait of Australopithecus Afarensis as the world had never seen before. That night, the team celebrated around a campfire. Someone played "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds" by the Beatles. The name stuck, not scientifically, but emotionally. Lucy became a symbol of ancient humanity, a bridge between ape-like ancestors and modern humans, an ambassador from a world long gone. Why did Lucy matter so much? Because she was astonishingly complete, about 40 of her skeleton recovered. For paleoanthropology, this was like finding a window into time rather than a keyhole. Her bones allowed scientists to reconstruct her posture, gait, and lifestyle with unprecedented accuracy. Her pelvis and leg bones proved unequivocally that she walked upright. She wasn't experimenting with bipedalism, she was committed to it. The angle of her femur revealed the inward slant typical of habitual bipeds. The structure of her pelvis showed adaptations for weight transfer during upright walking. Yet her arms were long and curved for climbing. Lucy's body was the perfect snapshot of transition, a walker who hadn't fully left the trees behind. Her discovery settled debates that had lasted decades. For much of the 20th century, scientists argued whether bipedalism emerged late or early in human evolution, and whether brain size or locomotion came first. Lucy answered this definitively: walking came first. She walked upright long before any significant brain expansion occurred. This revelation changed our understanding of what it meant to be human. Intelligence, creativity, culture, all the traits we pride ourselves on, came later. What began the human journey was simply the act of standing up. But Lucy revealed more than locomotion. Her small stature, about 3.5 feet tall, challenged assumptions that early relatives were large or imposing. Her bones showed that Afarensis lived in groups, faced predators larger than themselves, and survived through shared vigilance rather than physical dominance. Her curved fingers reminded the world that evolution is complex, layered with ancient traits that linger long after new ones emerge. Her discovery also ignited emotional reactions from people around the world. Lucy became more than a fossil, she became a symbol of connection. Her bones, arranged carefully in museum displays, felt familiar yet alien. She was not human, but she was not entirely separate either. She embodied the delicate thread linking all life, past and present, into one continuous story. Scientifically, Lucy sparked debates and deeper research. Some argued over her locomotion, others over her diet or social structure. But the fascination she sparked transcended academic boundaries. She influenced popular culture, inspired documentaries, books, and exhibitions, and brought prehistoric life into mainstream imagination. Imagine the moment Lucy walked through her world. A small female traveling with her group, moving between trees and open plains. Her feet pressed into soil, her eyes scanning the horizon for danger. She could not imagine that millions of years later, her bones would be uncovered and admired. That she would become a key figure in understanding humanity's origins. That strangers in distant lands would stand in museums, gazing at her remains with a mixture of awe, reverence, and curiosity. Her significance grew even larger when later discoveries showed that Lucy was not alone. Other Afarensis individuals were found in Ethiopia and Tanzania, adults, juveniles, even infants. Together, they formed a clearer picture of the species as a whole. But Lucy remained the icon, the first complete bridge between worlds. Philosophically, Lucy's discovery forces us to confront the scale of deep time. 3 million years separate us from her. Her species, her world, her struggles, they existed long before language, culture, or civilization. And yet, when her skeleton was placed in the hands of researchers, it felt intimate. Her body carried familiar patterns, hips like ours, knees like ours, a spine reshaped for upright posture. She was not simply a fossil, she was a reminder that our story is older, deeper, and more interconnected than we realize. Emotionally, her discovery touched a chord because she represents fragility. Her bones are small, delicate, almost fragile. She lived in a dangerous world where survival was never certain. Her death, like her life, was shaped by forces beyond her control. And yet, through the randomness of preservation, she became eternal. As this section draws to a close, Lucy stands not as a scientific artifact, but as a symbol of humanity's origins. She reminds us that the human journey did not begin with grand achievements, stone tools, or fire, but with simple steps on ancient ground. Steps taken by a small female hominin who could not foresee the future but helped shape it. Lucy changed science. She changed our understanding of ourselves. And through her silent, ancient bones, she continues to speak. In the fossil beds of Ethiopia's Afar region, there lies a haunting snapshot of deep prehistory, an assemblage of bones belonging to at least 13 individuals of Australopithecus Afarensis. They did not die one by one, scattered across time, they died together. Their remains, preserved in the same geological layer, create a scene so intimate, so tragic, that it feels almost like an echo of a family caught in the final moments of their lives. Known as the first family, this discovery offers one of the most extraordinary glimpses into the social world of early hominins. Through these silent bones, we understand not only how they lived, but how they died. To imagine their story, picture an ancient landscape millions of years ago. The terrain is rugged, marked by eroding gullies and patches of woodland. A small group of Afarensis moves through this environment, a mix of adults, juveniles, and infants. They travel as many primate groups do, loosely, but with an unspoken cohesion. The elders scan the horizon, juveniles play under careful watch, mothers carry infants close to their bodies. They navigate familiar paths worn by generations before them. But something changes. A sudden natural disaster, perhaps a flash flood, a collapsing embankment, or a violent storm, catches the group off guard. Water surges through a narrow channel, or the ground beneath them gives way. The force is overwhelming. Individuals tumble, collide, and struggle in the chaos. In those final moments, fear dominates, a primal confusion as bodies are swept together, unable to escape the force of nature. Then silence. The floodwaters retreat. Mud covers their bodies. Time begins its slow work. Over millions of years, sediment hardens, erosion exposes the remains, and finally, in 1975, scientists uncover the bones, small, scattered, and heartbreakingly connected by their shared fate. The first family site revealed individuals of multiple ages, a robust adult male, several adult females, juveniles, and infants. This diversity sparked one of the most important discussions in paleoanthropology. Did Australopithecus afarensis live in multi-member social groups similar to modern primates? The answer, drawn from the assemblage, is compelling. These individuals were not a random collection of bones washed together over time. They lived together, and died together. The site's significance lies in what it reveals about their social structure. The presence of several juveniles suggests a breeding population, one where adults collectively protected and raised the young. The variety in size and age of the individuals hints at a complex community, one with elders, adolescents, and infants all coexisting. Their proximity in death implies their proximity in life. Imagine the group before disaster struck. Juveniles scamper up small trees, practicing their climbing skills. An adult female gathers fruit while a younger male breaks open a tough seed pod with a stone. Infants cling to their mothers, observing the world with curious eyes. The robust male watches over the group from a nearby rise, listening for the distant footsteps of predators. Their lives are ordinary, but ordinary in the way of ancient beings, full of constant movement, alertness, and instinctual care. These individuals did not possess language, but communication flowed among them through gestures, calls, and glances. Their social interactions carried emotional weight. When a juvenile wandered too far, an adult's gentle nudge brought them back. When a conflict broke out, dominance displays settled the matter quickly. When danger loomed, the group clung tightly together. These connections were not abstract concepts, they were immediate, vital, and rooted in survival. At the first family site, bones were found in varying states of preservation. Some were fragmented, others nearly intact. Among them were small finger bones belonging to infants, remnants of lives that had only just begun. There were adult limbs showing signs of strength and wear. There were juvenile remains, whose bones still carried the marks of growth and development. Each bone, though silent, speaks of a life once lived, of movement, hunger, fear, and fleeting moments of comfort within the group. Scientists debated whether the group died together or whether their remains accumulated over time. But the consistency of the sediment layer, the positioning of bones, and the mixture of ages all point toward a single catastrophic event. This conclusion deepens the emotional resonance of the site. These were not solitary deaths but a collective loss, a moment of tragedy preserved across millions of years. Philosophically, the first family challenges our assumptions about the emotional world of early hominins. Though they lacked the cognitive depth of humans, their deaths together hint at a kind of social closeness. Whether or not they understood family as we do, they depended on each other. Their survival required collaboration, protection, shared vigilance, and basic care. The fact that they perished as a unit emphasizes the interconnectedness of their lives. Consider the moment disaster struck. A mother may have clutched her infant tightly, attempting to shield it. A juvenile may have cried out in alarm, seeking the protection of an adult. An elder might have stood firm, instinctively positioning himself between danger and the group. Their final struggle was not individual, but collective. And though their consciousness was limited, their instincts bound them together. The first family also provides clues about mortality patterns. Many of the individuals were young, revealing that early hominin life was perilous, with high death rates among juveniles. Those who survived childhood gained experience but still faced constant danger. The presence of older adults in the assemblage shows that some lived long enough to carry wisdom, knowledge of the landscape, of safe sleeping trees, of predator patterns. These elders would have been invaluable to the group's survival. Emotionally, the site evokes a profound sense of empathy. To see the remains of an ancient family, preserved by chance, is to feel the fragility of life stretched across time. Their bones, arranged by catastrophe rather than ritual, communicate something deeply human, that community existed before humanity itself. They remind us that vulnerability and loss did not begin with our species, they began long before. Scientifically, the first family assemblage became one of the most important windows into early hominin life. It provided evidence for group living, insights into growth and development in Afarensis, and clues about their mortality. It helped researchers understand the range of physical variation within the species. Most importantly, it gave context, a rare moment where an entire group tells a collective story. Imagine, once more, the moment the disaster ended. The savanna quiets. The water drains. The sun rises again, indifferent. The bodies lie still, covered in sediment. Other animals move through the landscape, unaware of the story being written under their feet. Time moves on. Seasons change. Erosion shapes the land. The world forgets, until millions of years later, when curious hands uncover what nature preserved. As this section draws to a close, the first family stands as a reminder that even before humans existed, social bonds shaped survival. These early hominins lived together, traveled together, struggled together, and in one tragic moment, died together. Their story, frozen in time, reveals both the vulnerability and strength of our ancient lineage, an echo of family in its earliest form. No species disappears in a single moment. Extinction is not a dramatic ending, but a slow, quiet fading, an unraveling shaped by countless small pressures that accumulate over time. For Australopithecus Afarensis, the species that stood bravely between forest and savanna, that learned to walk upright while still gripping branches, this fate unfolded over hundreds of thousands of years. They did not vanish suddenly or violently. Instead, they were gradually outpaced, outadapted, and overshadowed by the inevitable tide of evolutionary change. To understand their disappearance, we must return to the landscape that shaped them, the East African Rift Valley. The environment that forged Afarensis was one of unpredictability. For millions of years, climate shifts pushed and pulled ecosystems into new forms. Forests shrank. Grasslands expanded. Rainfall became erratic. The world Afarensis had adapted to was always shifting under their feet, but at some point, the changes became too extreme, too rapid for their transitional bodies and behaviors to keep up. Imagine a period of prolonged drought. Rivers dry into cracked beds. Food becomes scarce. Fruits grow infrequently. Roots harden deeper into the soil. Predator movements shift as they search for prey. For Afarensis, survival becomes harder each year. Their bodies, efficient for a flexible but limited diet, struggle in a world where plants become tougher and less nutritious. Their teeth show increased wear, their jaws work harder, and the energy they expend rises while food quality diminishes. At the same time, neighboring hominin species begin to emerge, hominins with slightly different physical traits better suited to the new landscape. Among these are members of the genus Homo, whose diets and behaviors gradually diverge. Early humans may have had access to more diverse foods, perhaps through more frequent scavenging or early forms of tool-assisted meat consumption. Even small advantages, a sharper flake, a more versatile hand, a slightly larger brain, begin to tip the balance toward their survival. The competition between species is rarely dramatic. There were no battles between Afarensis and early Homo. Instead, competition is subtle, overlapping territories, shared food resources, and increasing pressure caused by environmental shifts. When two species rely on the same shrinking habitat, the one with more flexible behavior, better endurance, or more efficient foraging stands a better chance. Over time, Afarensis may have been pushed into marginal environments, areas with fewer resources and greater risks. Predation also played a role in their decline. As landscapes changed, predator populations adapted too. New species emerged, older ones became more specialized, and their hunting strategies shifted. Without advanced tools or weapons, Afarensis remained vulnerable. Loss of juveniles to predators could slow population growth enough to affect long-term viability. Every lost infant, every injured adult, every predator encounter chipped away at their ability to maintain their numbers. Social structure may have influenced their fate as well. While Afarensis had strong social cohesion, they lacked the cultural complexity that would later help Homo groups withstand environmental pressures. Humans would eventually develop shared knowledge, divide labor, and adapt cooperatively to challenges. Afarensis relied on instinct and immediate experience. Their ability to innovate, though emerging, was limited. When faced with crisis, they had fewer tools, literally and figuratively, to cope. One of the most significant contributors to their disappearance was evolutionary branching itself. Species do not evolve in straight lines, they split. Afarensis did not fail, they transformed. Their lineage, or part of it, gave rise to species that were better adapted to changing conditions. Some populations may have evolved directly into early Homo species, while others remained as Afarensis until their numbers dwindled. Evolution is not about survival of every individual or every species, it is about survival of the lineage. And in this sense, Afarensis did not truly vanish, they transitioned into the future. Still, the last generations of Afarensis lived through difficult times. Imagine a small group wandering through an increasingly barren landscape. The trees they once climbed for safety grow sparser. The fruiting cycles they relied on stop aligning with the seasons. The grasses become coarser, requiring more effort to chew. Storms become irregular, some years flood with rain, others offer none. Their range contracts as competition intensifies. Their numbers slowly fall, not because of a single event, but due to 1,000 gentle pressures that wear down their resilience. There is something quietly tragic about this fade. No single fossil marks the last Afarensis. No final footprint tells the story of their final days. Their decline is invisible in the fossil record, spread thinly across layers of sediment and time. But emotionally, we can imagine the fragility of those final groups, small clusters of individuals doing their best to survive in a world that no longer favored them. Philosophically, their extinction reminds us of a fundamental truth about evolution: nothing lasts forever. Every species is temporary. Every adaptation is a negotiation with an ever-changing world. Afarensis existed for nearly 1 million years, far longer than modern humans have so far. Their disappearance is not a sign of weakness but a natural chapter in the long story of life. They thrived when their world suited them, paved the way for future hominins, and faded when their era came to an end. Yet their legacy endures, not only in bone and stone but in every step humans take today. The upright walk that defines our species first belonged to them. The balance between curiosity and caution, between exploration and survival, began in their minds. Their extinction was not an end, it was a transformation. Through the branches of evolutionary time, their lineage continued, adapted, innovated, and ultimately led to us. As this section closes, the fading of Australopithecus afarensis becomes more than a disappearance. It becomes a reminder that life is shaped by cycles: rise, adaptation, decline, transition. They vanished not because they failed, but because evolution moved forward. Their story ends quietly, without grand finale, but their influence resonates through every human footprint across the world. When Australopithecus afarensis first rose onto 2 legs, they could not have known they were planting the seeds of a destiny far beyond their own survival. They did not foresee cities, stories, science, or civilizations. They did not anticipate that one day, their distant descendants would gaze back across millions of years in awe. And yet, from their fragile, transitional bodies came one of the most transformative gifts in the history of life: the inheritance of upright walking. This final section explores what that inheritance means, not only biologically, but emotionally and philosophically, for the story of humanity. To appreciate this legacy, imagine an afarensis standing alone at the edge of a savanna at dusk. The sun bleeds across the sky. The wind rustles through tall grasses. Her body is small, her world dangerous, yet when she rises upright, she sees farther than any ape before her. That elevated view changes everything. It gives her warning, opportunity, and awareness. It allows her to observe migrating herds, distant storms, shifting patterns of shadow. Her posture becomes a vantage point, modest, but revolutionary. From this simple act of standing upright came a cascade of evolutionary changes that shaped every future species in our lineage. By freeing the hands, bipedalism allowed early hominins to carry food, infants, sticks, stones, objects that would one day become tools and weapons. By altering the pelvis, spine, and feet, upright walking created new constraints that eventually favored larger brains in later species. By improving the efficiency of long-distance travel, it allowed our ancestors to explore new territories, survive droughts, and adapt to unpredictable climates. The inheritance of walking is the inheritance of adaptation. But the legacy of Afarensis is not merely anatomical. It is psychological. Standing upright encouraged a new way of perceiving the world. A creature who sees farther learns to plan farther. A creature who scans horizons learns to anticipate danger, find opportunity, and navigate complexity. Upright posture helps shape the mental landscape that would later support curiosity, foresight, and problem-solving. Imagine Afarensis moving cautiously through a landscape that offered both food and danger. The ability to carry objects, sticks for defense, stones for opening food, expanded behavioral possibilities. Portable objects became extensions of the body. Each small innovation, though primitive, nudged the species toward creativity. Their minds were not yet human, but the seeds of human thought began with the simple freedom of hands unburdened by locomotion. Family life, too, was shaped by walking. Mothers carrying infants across difficult terrain needed strength and endurance. Their survival, and the survival of their young, depended on group cohesion. This reinforced social bonds that became the foundation of empathy, cooperation, and early community behavior. Walking did not create emotion, but it changed how early hominins experienced danger and safety together. It strengthened the importance of group movement, shared vigilance, and coordinated travel. In many ways, the inheritance of upright walking is the inheritance of connection. As millions of years passed, the lineage that followed Afarensis evolved in remarkable ways. Australopithecus Africanus. Paranthropus. Homo habilis. Homo erectus. Each branch experimented with new combinations of body, diet, cognition, and adaptability. Yet all of them carried the same fundamental trait, upright locomotion. It was the thread that stitched the hominin family together. Every species that rose after Afarensis stood on their foundation, literally. The emergence of Homo habilis brought more intentional toolmaking. Homo erectus mastered fire and expanded across continents. Neanderthals developed complex social structures. Modern humans began to tell stories, create art, and build cultures. All of this flowed, in some small but essential way, from the moment early hominins stood upright. It is impossible to separate the human mind from the human stance. Standing freed our vision, our hands, and our attention. It shaped how we interact with the world and how we interact with one another. Even today, standing and walking are deeply tied to expression. When a human stands tall, we associate it with confidence, awareness, readiness. Our metaphors reflect this ancient truth: stand up for yourself. Stand together. Stand firm. Take a stand. We still speak the language that Afarensis first wrote with their bodies. There is an emotional weight to recognizing this inheritance. The creatures who paved our path did not leave behind monuments or myths. They left footprints in volcanic ash. Bones scattered across ancient floodplains. Tiny teeth worn by a diet of roots and grasses. But through these fragile remains, they speak to us. They remind us that our story did not begin with brilliance, it began with endurance. It began with creatures who survived more through adaptability than dominance, more through cooperation than strength. Imagine the last generations of Afarensis. They walk the same land their ancestors walked for nearly 1 million years. They raise their young, search for food, avoid predators, and travel together as the seasons change. They do not know that their time is ending. They do not sense the rising presence of new hominins with different strengths. They simply live, as every species does, one moment at a time. And as they fade, their legacy continues, not through them, but through what they have already set in motion. They disappear, but their posture remains. It is carried forward through countless transformations, across time, species, landscapes, and continents. Their gift becomes humanity's defining trait. Philosophically, the inheritance of standing tall reminds us of the humility embedded in our origins. We are not descended from conquerors, but from survivors. Our intelligence did not emerge suddenly, it rose slowly, shaped by the need to navigate danger, scarcity, and change. The very way we move through the world, on two legs, with upright spines and open horizons, is a direct echo of a species that lived millions of years before language, before culture, before imagination. Yet their influence is everywhere. In every walk across a forest trail. In every child taking their first steps. In every migration across deserts, mountains, and oceans. In every person's instinct to rise after falling. The story of Australopithecus Afarensis is the story of becoming, of rising slowly, imperfectly, courageously. Their existence carved a path through time on which all future hominins would walk. And through their simple act of standing upright, they transformed not only their own lives, but the destiny of an entire lineage. As this final section closes, one image lingers, a small figure, 3 million years ago, taking steady steps across ancient earth. Her shadow stretches long across the ground. She walks toward no future she can imagine. Yet she carries inside her body the blueprint of every human who will ever live. We inherit her stance. We inherit her courage. We inherit her journey. And in every step we take, we continue the legacy of standing tall.